Cool Figure TV. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. You know I'm your humble host, the Y'all Mean of Revolution and historical humiliation, y'all. We got historical humiliation for Kamala Harris and the bootlicking shoe shining Greek freak. Well, before we get into that, be sure to wipe your feet. That means hit the like button, share, subscribe. Let everybody know Cool Figure is live. Support the platform. You in the House of Revolution. They sad. It's like they're mourning. The lady's still alive, y'all, but they're mourning because they know it's over for her. She is historically, she is a historical loser. And let's get into why.
Now to discuss is pollster and communications strategist Frank Luntz. Frank, thanks so much for joining us. I always love having you on because I learn a lot from what you're learning from just talking to so many voters. And I wonder if you'll just start us off with where you see and what you're hearing about this moment in this race.
I take this very seriously. I'm actually prepared for this segment. And some of the things, half the people are going to be angry at half the things that I say. The issue agenda is set. It is going to be, and it's not the economy, it's affordability, it's prices, it's costs. That and inflation are the two key issues. Those are going to drive this last 23 days. And frankly, Donald Trump has the advantage on both. And on immigration, the reason why he wants to talk about immigration is because the current president, President Biden and Vice President Harris, seems so weak on the issue. I will raise this point carefully, that to the average American, calling for the death penalty for someone who's here illegally, killing a cop, is not insane. It's not abusive. It's exactly what the left, the center, and the right would call for. That Trump, and I realize that he's gone off the rails in some of his statements, and you can replay them to your viewers right now. But there's a reason why he's going up, that he's recovering after one of the worst debate performances in modern history. It's because he is speaking the language of the average American, and she still isn't coming clean about where she stands on some issues and what she's all about. And it is a genuine problem for her campaign. And I understand why Democrats are getting frustrated, because there are key groups right now, Latinos, young African-American men, and union members that are traditionally with the Democrats that aren't in this campaign right now.
And on that.
Hey guys, so I'm back home. I'll get into another video of what's going on with my house and all of that. But this morning I tried to live stream the interview that Kamala Harris did with the Breakfast Club, basically, to gerrymander the black vote, which, oh my God, this was probably her worst, not probably, it is her worst interview. It has the comments on it. It is just destroying not only the show, but her.
Oh, worst interview was last night on Fox, but I didn't know that everybody ripping her behind the Charlemagne interview. Okay, we have to look into
the host, everything about it, and it is insane. The backlash that has come from this, the questions that were asked, the answers she gave, pure lies. Now she's a praying woman of God that grew up in the black church.
Lies.
They even brought a black pastor on. It's when I tell you this race pandering at the highest level that no one is falling for. I mean, it is unreal. But the problem is I could not live stream. They cut off my stream twice. I had to go onto X, which I don't even use, but just so I can get the information out there. It's because they kept trying to copyright it and stop my stream, because it's weird. I'm black. I'm a woman. This was supposed to be for me. Why can't I do commentary on this? Don't you want this to go out? Or do you only want positivity and joy and hope and change to go out? But I plan on getting some clips and trying to put that together, because you must see it. I mean, must. If you're not, it doesn't matter if you're black or not, does not matter. Okay. It is that bad. Like that bad. Like the code switch, the accent, the language, everything about it. This is the worst pandering I've ever seen any politician do. It is worse than Hillary Clinton hot sauce. It is horrendous from the start to the end. But what I wanted to bring up with this is, you know, this guy, you know, Frank Luntz, he does the polling. I've brought in videos about him before. Some people don't believe in polls. Some people do. I do think the polls are mostly accurate. Yes, there is a margin of error, but I do believe that the polling does tell the trend. Okay. 2016 was an anomaly because Trump was an anomaly. And there's some things where, you know, things could be a little bit off, but it's going to be in the margin of error. And this is why they're sounding the alarm as Democrats. This is why they're trying to pander now to Black men and the Black vote. This is why they're trying to, you know, she's doing more interviews. Remember, she didn't need to do any interviews. That's what her team and all of her operatives were saying. She's doing great, but they weren't realizing it's the honeymoon. They thought the sugar high would continue. But now that this pollster, he's bringing up doing these Zoom calls, and I'm on other Zoom calls I try to really dig deep to find you guys information that you may not see so much, you know, on mainstreamers. There's so many things to view. I want to bring this up because this is an important information as to why Kamala Harris is losing right now. And she is 100% losing. I don't care who tries to spin it. I have a video with Reid that I'm going to destroy her, because this is Joy Reid has the most outrageous take on the polls. Now she doesn't believe it. It's all Republican polls. Republicans are like skewing the polls. Like, it is really far out there, blue MAGA, tenfold derangement. So, but with this, pay attention. And this is the thing that you need to see. They are losing everywhere. Even young white women. She's not getting the shares that any other Democrat has gotten of any of the voting blocks. Her Call Her Daddy podcast she did, I did a reaction to that she has the huge backlash. The girl who hosts that, oh my gosh, the like to dislike ratio, it's like 80% dislike. You go to her Instagram, they're killing her on the Instagram. And these are young white women. So they're trying to blame, you know, Black men or men in general. They blame different voting blocks, everything. They blame everything but themselves, everything but having a weak and horrible candidate in Kamala Harris. And they keep talking about Donald Trump is going to destroy democracy and do all these things. But yet they have this woman up there that's supposed to lead the country, and she cannot answer a question straight. It's the more I watch of her, I just grow more shocked by the moment of how insane the things she says, the things that come out of her mouth are. And so, guys, I always say I'm independent, so I like to dive deep. I don't just like to go on the surface and see what the headlines are. I like to dig deep, and this is one of those videos. Make sure you subscribe to my channel here, Melanie King, and my new channel, Melanie Off Script. The link will be below. Doing a lot of reactions over there. You're not going to miss. And
see, what we should be pissed about is this wicked, racist country don't want to let a descendant of a slave actually touch the throne and sit in a seat of power. Because then they no good ass gonna have to talk about when they talk about historical background, they have to get into slavery, the descendant of slaves. See, they never get to say that about Kamala. They never talk about the descendant of slave or Kamala or Barack. They run their histories, and it's a good feel-good story. If you actually have to let a descendant of a slave get into the White House, it's not gonna be a feel-good story, because they gotta talk about from the fields to the White House. And how finally we have went from picking cotton to run the country. They don't say that yet. And they don't ever want to. So that's why they playing these bullshit games with putting people in power that has nothing to do with us.
Let's get into it.
No, Frank, we've seen recent polls showing Harris's support among Black men is lower than certainly where Biden was. I know you hosted a focus group with Black men who are supporting Trump. I want to play a clip from that.
The reason why I'm voting for Donald Trump is because simply I want to make America great again. I think the last 4 years we have seen over-promising without a plan. What I watched on the debate stage were a lot of lofty goals from a Democratic candidate who's been vice president of the United States for 3 years and 8 months, and nothing that she proposed, or spoke on, she had a plan attached.
That's so interesting, Frank. Give us some more context around that conversation you had.
It's not that they're pro-Republican, because they aren't. but Donald Trump reaches them in a personal and a human way. They feel victimized by the federal government. They feel like they're attacked or even persecuted for being Black men. And they believe that Donald Trump understands their plight more than Harris does, that this challenge, this economic challenge, this social challenge, this racial challenge, they see more in Trump's language and his willingness to fight and beat the system. They see more in themselves in that fight than they do in Harris, because they see her as representing voters who maybe they don't work, maybe they're of a different gender, but it's not who they are. It's the same thing with union membership, where the rank and file absolutely are moving towards Trump at the same moment that the leadership are overwhelmingly, maybe 90% endorsing Harris. And among Latino votes, you have that schism as well, where it's not what he says about illegals, because if you're here legally, you agree with what Donald Trump is saying. I know this is blowing people's minds right now, but I want to emphasize that this looks to me just like Hillary Clinton's campaign in 2016, where voters woke up the next day to a Trump presidency. Harris is miscalculated, she's miscalibrated, and it's causing damage to her campaign.
So we're 3 weeks out from Election Day. Early voting started in some places. It's about to start in others. Is there time to recalibrate for Harris, in your opinion?
Absolutely. The best example is when asked, does she have any differences with Joe Biden? She says no. The first thing she should have said is, on the border, I do disagree. I do think that we've made some mistakes, and here's how we're going to correct them. But she's not willing to do that. Hillary Clinton played it safe in the last 28 days of the election, not engaging with the press, not engaging with voters, and Harris is doing exactly the same thing, and it's going to have the same impact if she doesn't change that strategy.
She's trying to now engage with the voters. Now that her, she can't just sit back and make speeches on the teleprompter and just, hide away. Now she's going and doing different interviews, and they're all bombing. Every single one is bombing. And her polling gets worse the more she talks, the more people get to know her. She is just a horrific candidate, period. I don't care how you vote. I don't care, you're Democrat, Republican. I'm just speaking in political terms, being a political nerd. She's one of the worst candidates in American history. It is that bad. And so the fact that the Democrats think that people by and large are just going to buy it and that they could, don't have to engage and actually provide real solutions while she is currently part of the administration and keep lying and blaming everything is Trump's fault in her administration. Everything's Trump's fault. Oh, she's the VP, so she doesn't have any power. When she's lockstep, she said she's been in on every major decision that the Biden administration has made. She will change nothing. He didn't make any mistakes. Everything is perfect. She's just going to continue the same thing. And then the things that she promises, they're just like Disney wishes. There's nothing hard policy. It's bizarre that they thought that this would, work with the American people, but actually it's not, because it has in the past, especially when their goal is to segregate people into different groups, and that the Latinos are going to vote for me, the Blacks are going to vote for me, the gays are going to vote for me, the women are going to vote for me. Like, they try to segment the population, and now that people are not voting as a monolith, they don't know what to do, because they're used to just having racial division and get in line. And Trump bad. That is literally the only thing they talk about. Project 2025. Trump is bad. He's going to ruin democracy. Like, over and over and over and over again, while offering no real solutions but fear.
And my other thought here is just, we talk a lot about persuadable voters, people that still could go back or forth. Some theories of the case are there really aren't many of those anymore. It's about turning out your voters at this point. But because she is in this unique position, Harris, being still so fresh in this race because of this wild campaign season we've had, it seems as if she's still defining herself to people. And Trump, as we just saw in that clip that Elena played leading in here, is still desperately trying to define her as well.
He's unplugged, for better or worse. He's speaking what he truly believes, for better or worse. And some voters, undecided voters, are turned off to that because they're turned off to that rhetoric. But he's actually speaking, I say this as clearly as I can, he's using language on prices and on immigration that the public responds to. It's not insane. It actually is a majority of Americans. And the Harris campaign so disagrees with it, so disagrees with the strategy and the policies, that they are miscalibrated to how to win them over. And one last point, it really isn't the undecided right now. I accept that. Those people at 3 or 4% probably won't decide. They will probably stay home, or they'll vote for a third party or write someone in. The key now is turning out your partisans. She has the most incredible, intense support among young women, 18 to 30. But Trump's vote overall is damn well determined to vote. They will stand in line. They will do whatever it takes. And even in that intensity at this moment, he's got a very, very slight advantage.
And just before I let you go, I do want to touch on something that continues to bear out in a lot of this polling. And I would imagine, you'll tell me, in focus group as well, but this gender gap that we keep seeing show up again and again and again. What are your thoughts on that? And give us some nuance around it beyond just there's a gender gap.
That is the question of this campaign. That's going to be what historians focus on. She has driven female vote to incredible levels, and particularly younger women. Trump has done the same for older men. So you have this conflict, and it is not just about issues. It really is about attributes, how Trump presents himself and how Harris presents herself. She is a role model for younger women. Trump is saying and almost screaming exactly what older men feel. So this is going to be a problem. Here's the issue. I'm afraid that we're not going to know who won this election on election night, and we're not going to know the next night, and we're not going to know even the night after that. CNN and organizations like yours need to start now.
Okay, so he's going into something else, but I wanted to point out that, everybody is signaling how she is losing, and that everything that she's doing is not working, and why Trump is actually resonating with a lot of voters. Again, I'm going to keep saying it. I don't care who doesn't like it. I'm independent, but I like to look at what is going on beneath the surface and not what's on mainstream media. There have been, for 10 years, they have been going in on every detail, every drop that Trump does, everything that he does. But no one gives the same scrutiny to the Democrat side. They do not give the same scrutiny to Kamala Harris, and they surely didn't do it for Biden when they all knew that he was mentally gone. They all knew. The media, as well as all the Democrats, they knew it, but they just thought we were too stupid to really see it. But once the debate put it on full display and they could no longer say that, well, then they had to take him out. And now they're saying, no, it's Trump that has a cognitive decline, while Biden is still the president. And we don't know where this man is. He's at the beach sundowning somewhere, eating supper at 4:30 and going to bed. It's deranged. They really think they were stupid, but it's like they're operating
living his best life.
Their campaign as though social media doesn't exist, as though independent people don't exist to look these things up, to talk about these things. Mainstream media is not where everyone is getting their news anymore. And that is why you see these numbers pulling away from key demographics that the Democrat Party has relied on to vote for them. And they're now being turned completely off.
Control our people no more with their BS. It's turned out real bad for them. The worst in 60 years. I mean, since 1960. God damn. Kamala, what did you do? You put the nail in the coffin of the Democratic Party, lady. All right. We got so much. I know it's real bad for Kamala, but Kamala, this is your life, you know. You want to be president?
What's going on, everybody? Thank you all for joining me today. If you haven't already, please make sure you hit the like button, because that's the most important thing you can do for me on this channel. What it does, that helps make sure that those who subscribe to the channel and you get the notifications, and it also helps to push this video through the YouTube algorithm as well. Secondly, if you're new to the channel, or maybe you've been ghost watching this channel for quite some time now, please do me a favor and yourself a favor by hitting the subscribe button, as well as the bell notification next to the subscribe button so you can be notified whenever I release a new video. And lastly, please make sure you share this video out on your social media platforms to your family and friends and inform them on this news and information. And yes, that does help to give me a slight boost in YouTube algorithm as well. And with the introduction out of the way, let's get into today's news. And today we have to speak on MSDNC again. We have to speak about them again. As I reported earlier, that news station is in complete shambles. MSNBC, which is really MSDNC, they are in complete shambles right now, doing all type of mental gymnastics over the fact that Donald Trump has closed the gap in polling, and Kamala Harris and him are pretty much tied, not due to margin of errors, but very much so tied 48-48 in the national polling and a lot of these polls that are coming out. Once again, they're trying to come up with all type of excuses and just some sort of an understanding for why and how that this is, so that they can dupe their own followers of MSDNC into believing that things aren't as bad for them as they believe that they are. But right here and now, what we're going to see as early voting has begun in Arizona, MSNBC is on the ground, and at these early voting stations, they can't find a Kamala Harris voter in sight. And I mean that quite literally. Let's get into this right here.
I should note, we did not find a single person who audibly would tell us that they voted for Kamala Harris. These were Trump supporters getting out to vote early in the all-important Mojave County. Take a listen to some of our conversations.
Well, the difference is going to be that everybody's coming out early, and everybody that we talked to has made a special effort this year to vote. And you can see it here in the parking lot. You know, this library's usually got 5 cars in it. There's a ton of cars in it now.
Said you voted early for the first time.
For the first time.
Why did you vote early this year?
Honestly, because Donald Trump told me to.
What a good answer.
He keeps saying it, and I've been thinking about it, and so here I am.
There's no better answer than that, right? Because Donald Trump told me to.
We met one man who did not vote in 2020, but he said he was horrified by the state of the country, so he is voting here in 2024. We met 3 other voters, one that moved from California, one that moved from Oregon, blue states, who said that they moved here and were eager to vote in a state where Donald difference. And so it's those types of voters that not only Republicans are watching come to the polls, but also Democrats have a close eye, understanding that they need to really win the Maricopa County area to make up for any potential juicing of turnout here among the MAGA faithful in places like Mojave County, Jose.
Don't let language like that go over your head when they say some kind of juicing of turnout, as if they're trying to, insinuate foul play. I notice things like that, and I don't let that kind of stuff go over my head. But that's besides the point for the moment. For those of you who haven't been paying attention, at Trump's rallies, he has been making it a point to tell everyone, get out and vote early, and he's been strongly suggesting and promoting
beat them early, humiliate them early, they in shambles early, make some of them just stay at home whining.
To do mail-in ballots as well, if you need to do it, if you absolutely need to do it. Obviously the preference is early voting over mail-in ballots, but we all saw how critical mail-in ballots were as they were just coming, out of nowhere on behalf of Joe Biden, and how, mail-in ballots really was a difference maker in places like Pennsylvania, right? But once again, as I stated earlier, the preference is to go vote early, which is what you're seeing here. Now, as it pertains to mail-in ballots and early voting, I discussed this in a prior video a few days ago, so I'm not going to go through the article right now, but I will just pull up the headline for you so you see that I'm not making this stuff up. But as it pertains to early voting as well as mail-in ballot requests, these are the coveted methods of voting that really, once again, gave Joe Biden the election in 2020. Early voting is down significantly compared to 2020. And the data holds bad news for Democrats, as you can see in this article here. Now, if I were to go through it and read it as I did once before, you would also see that it's not just early voting that's down, but mail-in ballot requests are down too. Mail-in ballot requests are down significantly from 2020, particularly in the coveted swing states that Kamala Harris needs to win. And that spells disaster for her, given the fact that I will pull this up here concerning Pennsylvania, because as everyone is saying, essentially whoever wins Pennsylvania wins the election. Like I said, I won't go through the whole article, but this is actually very important concerning Pennsylvania. And it reads as such: Joe Biden carried Pennsylvania because he built up a 1.4 million vote advantage with absentee voters, just enough to let him survive Donald Trump's 1.3 million vote lead with election day balloters, right? See, this is why Trump said, get out and vote early. And if you have to vote by mail, please do it and just get it done early. But as you can see here, and I will zoom in, it clearly shows Donald Trump's ground game is impeccable, but it was the absentee ballots that brought Joe Biden over the finish line. It's looking like this time around, that is not going to be the case for Kamala Harris as it pertains to mail-in ballots and early voting. Once again, that spells a disaster for her. And another thing as well that I covered in the video I uploaded about 2 hours ago, if you check out the trajectory of independent voters, right? Those who classify themselves as independent make up 43% of voters, right? 43% of voters actively identify as independents, and Democrats and Republicans are tied 27 and 27, right? As it pertains to those who identify as Democrats and Republican. But here's where Republicans break away. Of independents, of those who identify as independents, when you ask them what are their political leanings, do they lean more towards Republicans or Democrats, even though you're an independent, 45% of independents say they lean towards Republicans versus 43% who leans towards Democrat. Once again, in between this concerning independent voters, and now looking at the ground game of Donald Trump as it pertains to him being able to energize his base to get out and vote early. As you can see, the woman said she never voted early before, but why is she voting early this year? Because Donald Trump told me to. You see that this is working. MSNBC couldn't find a Kamala Harris voter in sight in Arizona. And once again, as I keep stating over and over again in this video, this truly does spell disaster for Kamala Harris if things keep trending in the direction that they currently are going. And with all that being said, that does it for today's video. So I want to thank you all for joining me today. Please hit the like button on your way out.
There's a case for panic. I mean, there's a case, there's data out there that should alarm Democrats. And you go through and look at some of those things. When you hear people like Alyssa Slotkin in Michigan or Tammy Baldwin in Wisconsin privately telling people that the vice president's behind in those states, that's a good reason to worry. You look at her numbers with African-American voters, her numbers with Hispanic voters, that's a good reason to worry.
Meanwhile, did you ever think that 44% of Latinos are supporting Donald J. Trump? That's what's going on today. African-American community supporting Donald J. Why? Because his policies worked and they lived under his policies, Anna. They lived under his policies. And now today, the Latino community is being choked by inflation.
Let's look at the poll, the numbers you're talking about, the latest New York Times Siena College poll, likely Latino voters, Harris at 56%, Trump at 37%, which is a much lower margin for a Democratic nominee that they've had over the past 3 elections.
Look, I think there's a lot of things going on. One of the things that I found really interesting about that poll also was that the majority of Latinos think that when Donald Trump is making anti-immigrant remarks and when he's making, talking with racial slurs and the things he says that we all have heard him say, they think it doesn't apply to them. And I have a really hard time understanding that. And so to me, it boggles the mind that somebody who looks like you, who looks like me, who sounds like you, who sounds like me, think that when he is making anti-immigrant racial offenses, it doesn't apply to them.
I want to give you the last thought.
I think Anderson, when President Trump's talking, he's talking about criminal folks that are being sent to our country. He's not talking about Latinos that are coming here to work hard. There's a process to come here to work hard.
Do you think that a racist is going to ask you for your immigration papers? Do you think a racist is going to ask you for your immigration papers? Do you think the person... Okay.
Latinos believe and they know that President Trump is not a racist.
Oh,
He's
really?
a business owner.
That's why he got investigated by DOJ for not ranking
I'm on the Trump 47 bus. I'm a Latino.
That means that
he has me on that bus.
That means you're okay with racism. It doesn't mean he's not racist.
Absolutely not.
We're going to leave it there.
What Donald Trump has said about an issue near and dear to both of your hearts, the issue of Black Americans and Latino voters. Kamala Harris has been doing interviews on Black media. Trump, though, is overperforming in polling with both groups compared to past Republicans. Here is what he said when he was campaigning in Pennsylvania.
Any African American or Hispanic, and you know how well I'm doing there, that votes for
Georgia?
Kamala, you got to have your head examined because they are really screwing you. They are really screwing you.
It is Kamala, for the record, but he is denigrating voters for making a choice that he does not like. Shelley, to you, what does he achieve with that?
Do y'all hear that? I love this. He's denigrating voters for going against a choice that he doesn't. What? Ain't that what Barack did? Ain't that what all these other shoe shiners they drag forward is doing? Beating us over the head because we don't want to vote for Kamala. Hey, y'all do that to us every damn day.
That was
y'all
crazy.
do that to us every damn day.
The hypocrisy is
y'all
insane.
do that to us every motherfucking day.
He is denigrating voters for making a choice that he does not like. Shelley, to you, what does he achieve with this?
Well, first of all, how is he denigrating voters?
He's saying that they are being, for lack of a better word, screwed.
Taken advantage of. They're being taken advantage of. They're paying higher pricing. They're working class, the ones that he's talking about, working class, lower middle class. They're paying more for food, they're paying more for gas, and they're being taken advantage of.
But
and
Shelley,
over the course of 30 years, they voted.
He also said that they had to have their head examined. That is not something that is a compliment.
It's not a denigration.
Obama just told me the same thing. Obama just told me the same thing. I've got Black women telling me I'm not really a. He inferred them. He implied them. He certainly did. He even threatened us with "You're lucky Michelle's not here." I mean, come on. Let's not make things up. Let's be honest here, and let's really be clear what's being said.
Hold on. He said that. I didn't catch that part, bro.
He did. Yeah, he did say
it was more the recording. Yeah,
he did say that.
He said we lucky Michelle.
We only watched the clip. We never watched the recording.
Yeah,
we watched the clip, not the full thing. It was a phone recording.
What do you mean by that, though? Like if she pull up, she gonna whoop my ass or something?
She gonna get on your ass too. Yeah, she gonna say the same thing about her black
man. As a black man, and I'm like, black man, damn it! How dare you vote for a white man?
Things up. Let's be honest here, and let's really be clear what's being said. If you're an African American man, look, let me boil this election down in the African American community to a very simple a reference to great Malcolm X. This race is between House African Americans and field African Americans, and the field African Americans are going for Donald Trump. I'm talking about your men who. I'm talking about your men who build, your men who put things together, your men who work with their hands, your men who do things, not the men who push paper, or the men who are connected to power and want to continue to be connected to power. I'm talking about the men and women in our community who are actually doing the work.
African American men who are professionals who work in white collar jobs? Is that what I'm hearing from you? Or
no,
you know what he meant.
I'm
No,
just trying to
see, there you
understand,
go,
is
using that
Shelley the
word again.
house
What I'm doing
one
is
or the
drawing
field
the
woman? I'm just trying
contrast.
to understand that part.
She in
that house. She
I'm
likes
just trying to
it.
understand.
Just like you.
We have someone
I'm
who's
trying to
spitting.
say,
I'm just trying to understand the
the
one that's
field-
spitting talking points
the
right now.
field-
Are you the house Negro or the field Negro that you're referring to? So I just want to make sure your question was about denigrating black people. That literally was your question. You have a Republican
Right, and I'm
fool who is
answering
talking
it, and I
right now
answered it. I
about.
answered
You
it.
literally
Is
just
that the
said
same thing
that
what they
black
was doing?
men.
Or
You actually just said.
that was a good analogy. Wait. Isn't that the same thing
ass.
they just accused him of doing? Of Trump of doing?
Yeah.
Isn't that what he just did?
Because I'm like, who a fool?
He said a Republican fool. Wait, so are you denigrating people who are Republican? Are you denigrating people who think differently to you? Is that
We've
what
been
you
in
said?
that field.
Isn't that why we're here?
Well, technically, we ain't field niggas.
No, technically not.
We technically not. We behind in the cold air.
Hey, that's cool.
We in the cold air.
He's not talking about Republican. Up and down, that's true. Ice cubes or water. He's not talking about Republican and Democrat. He's talking about we mean a nice blue collar and white
That's what I'm saying. I understand it.
You have a Republican
Right, and I'm
fool who
answering
is
it,
talking
and I
right now
answered it. I
about.
answered it.
You literally just
I
said
answered
that
it,
black
sir.
men. You actually just said this is an election about house or field. This is the nonsense that we are listening to right now by those that are supporting
No,
Donald
that's not
Trump.
what I said, sir.
That is
That's
actually
not
what you
I
just
said.
There's only clearly
I
you
said
must be
the
you
field
must be
is
in your
for
own
Trump.
talk. I'm not
I
sure what
said
kind of
the
radio show
field-
you have that you can't listen to your own
I
thing. So
said
you
the
actually just
field
said.
brothers are for Trump.
Again,
the field
do you
brothers are for
understand?
Trump. That's clearly what I said.
You sound
No, I do
absurd
understand, sir.
and
I do understand.
silly. And so let's actually talk about the substance
No.
of your question. The
No.
substance of the question was
No, the
around
substance of
denigrating.
what I said is very
The
clear.
substance of the
Sir.
question was
Sir, the
denigrating
substance
Black
of
and
what I
Latino
said-
communities.
Sir, the substance of
My
what I
name
said
is
is very
Michael.
clear.
My name
if
is
you let me
Michael.
finish and
My
not
name
cut
is
me off.
Michael. And we thank you that.
Michael.
So the point here,
All right, my
the
brother.
question that was
All right,
raised
my brother.
around denigrating Black and Latino communities. and
All
the
right, my brother.
concerning-
Let me answer the question.
The
Are you
concerning
going to let me
part-
raise? Are you going to let me answer the question?
The concerning part.
Are you going to
that
let me answer the question?
Shelley, you
Shelley has
made the point
filibustered the
saying
point.
that
Yeah.
you made the point
big-ass blue
saying
jacket.
that you believe
The
that
point
it
I'm
is-
making, ma'am, Sarah.
Go
Sarah,
ahead.
the point I'm making is this: the men who get up every day and make things happen with their hands, they build things. They're plumbers, they're electricians, they're working for Amazon. These men who are coaching 7 and under football, not because their son or daughter plays, but because they want to keep brothers off the
What is your
streets and they're
point?
volunteering their time. These men are going for Trump. These men, and I used an analogy made famous by the great Malcolm X. So if you're saying that I'm denigrating anybody, then you must assume that he was denigrating somebody. So don't even throw that word out there. The fact of the matter is that's what you're seeing in the Black community. So I'm not denigrating anybody.
What you got to say about that? Heard the filibuster now. So the point yesterday.
I answered your question.
When Vice President.
Man, you see how he tried to change the topic?
Yeah.
He ain't nothing to say. When Malcolm X said it. He said, he even said it. He said, this is a quote from the great Malcolm X. He said that.
He said at the beginning, but I forgot about that too. I forgot about that too. Grilled his ass. I like that.
Malcolm X was the one that said.
You get a liberal right there.
Yeah. He had to shut his ass up.
Malcolm X
also said the greatest threat to America and the greatest threat to the black man is the white liberal.
He did say that.
Yeah, he said that.
I know. And why do you think he dead?
Was it the white liberals that got? They said the FBI went got. They revealed. They revealed on paper, on document.
Whose agenda do they serve a lot? Over there. Because who did they try to get? Trump. So who could the FBI? They might be on the. Not your right hand, but your poll that the liberal. Not a right hand, but you know what pissed me off? I was thinking about it the other day. You brought it up. You said, "Do we trust in the FBI?" Because the poll that the Democrats keep bringing up of how crime rate was low on the bottom, they keep saying, "Well, the FBI said this poll. Do we trust them? Do we trust that motherfucker? No, we don't.
We kind of do a little. We got it.
Well, there's certain things we do.
Got it.
But
Kind
what
of trust.
Well, it was must-see TV last night. Brett Baier pressed Vice President Kamala Harris on everything from the border to the economy to Joe's mental fitness during her first formal sit-down interview with Fox News as vice president.
Yeah, for the first time ever, Kamala Harris sat down for an interview with Fox, which really showed how desperate she was now that she's not doing so well in the polls. We're talking about a woman who never interviewed with Fox before, not even when she ran for the Senate, not for her first run for president in 2019, or when Biden selected her as VP. She never showed up for a Fox interview. And almost 4 years into her position at the White House, she never went on Fox. When she was selected once again for this promotion, not elected to run as president, she refused to show up for the first debate on Fox. 3 networks had debates scheduled. Trump accepted all 3. Fox was supposed to be the first, but she refused to agree to those. Then after the first debate, she went begging for another when she declined 2 out of 3 already. But yeah, she's gone years ducking real questions, and all of a sudden, she ran to Fox when her internal polling said that she was losing everybody. Black people, Hispanic men, white men, Muslims. So she ran desperately over to Fox after avoiding them for years, looking to take some of that Trump support away and also appeal to the independents.
And with less than 3 weeks to the election day, the Democratic nominee trying to make the case that she offers a new way forward despite being in power the last 3.5 years.
If you're turning the page, you've been in office for 3.5 years.
And Donald Trump has been running for office.
But you've been the person holding the office.
Come on.
What a joke.
If you missed the interview, I can tell you that was her answer almost every time. No matter the question, her answer was always Donald Trump. Now, that may work for her crowd of feminists and sassy men, but this won't move the needle for logical people, especially independent voters. They don't even know you because no one voted for you at the top of any ticket in the primary or general. You just got installed like a toilet by billionaires. And instead of using your time in the media to explain your case for you and how you will be different from Biden after 4 years with him in the White House, instead every single answer was always Trump, Trump, Trump. Listen, people are not trying to hear about Trump if they're watching your interview. They want to hear about you, your record, your positions, your plans. And I have to admit, this is one of the main reasons why Kamala is losing. She failed to do that over and over. She also failed to take any accountability whatsoever for the last 4 years.
Come on.
So it was a tense interview at times as Harris tried to dodge some questions and point the blame toward Donald Trump. Toward the end of the interview, though, Brett says it had to quickly be wrapped up after her team signaled to him to stop.
There are critics who look at what the administration did and say and think differently. Madam Vice President, they're wrapping me very hard here. I hope you got to say what you wanted to say about Donald Trump. There are a lot of things.
There's more to say. I have much more to say.
Madam Vice President,
and
they're giving me a hard rap.
Well, I thank you for the time.
Much more to say.
And by the way, this is another reason why this lady is performing worse than Obama and Hillary. She's obviously so weak and fragile that she can't take real interview questions. She can only take softball questions from her friends and folks kissing her feet. For one, she showed up late. Then her team only gave them about 20 minutes before they started waving the white flag. And again, as I said in my previous commentary, Obama and Hillary always showed up for Fox. They did interviews, they showed up for town hall meetings and debates, but their curry queen is so delicate, she wouldn't do any of that for years. She had her nose up in the air for 3 months. And when she finally showed up after years of ducking Fox, she was rusty and obviously unprepared.
20 minutes.
That's really what this interview revealed. She just can't answer simple questions. And her team had to wave the white flag to get her out of the interview. She's too weak for an interview, but she's supposed to be strong with Russia, strong with China, strong with all these forces in the Middle East. Really? How? Without bringing up Trump and her mama.
Okay. Prior to that moment, Harris faced several tough, direct questions like how her presidency would differ from the current Biden-Harris administration.
So you're not Joe Biden, you're not Donald Trump, but nothing comes to mind that you would do differently?
Let me be very clear. My presidency will not be a continuation of Joe Biden's presidency. And like every new president that comes into office, I will bring my life experiences, my professional experiences, and fresh and new ideas. I represent a new generation of leadership. For example, am someone who has not spent the majority of my career in Washington, D.C.
True, you spent most of your career laying on your back in California. Yeah, to get cars and positions from Willie Brown. And when you finally got up and was given power in California through those Willie Brown connections, you spent most of your career railroading Black men and Black women. It's almost like you tried to use Black people to get your get back for what you had to do in those Hollywood political circles.
Your campaign slogan is a new way forward, and it's time to turn the page. You've been vice president for 3.5 years. So what are you turning the page from?
Well, first of all, turning the page from the last decade in which we've been burdened with the kind of rhetoric coming from Donald Trump that has been designed and implemented to divide our country and have Americans literally point fingers at each other.
Madam Vice President, more than 70% of people
that is
tell
about turning the
pollsters-
page on rhetoric that people are frankly exhausted of, Brett.
You've been in office for 3.5 years.
And Donald Trump has been running for office.
But you've been the person holding the office.
Come on.
Madam
You
Vice
and I
President.
both know what I'm talking about. You and I both know what I'm talking about.
I actually don't. What are you talking about?
What I'm talking about is that over the last decade,
No, I actually don't.
But you're
people
the
have
lever of
become,
power.
but listen, over the last decade, it is clear to me, and certainly the Republicans who are on stage with me, the former chief of staff to the president, Donald Trump, former defense secretaries, national security advisor, and his vice president, one, that he is unfit to serve, that he is unstable, that he is dangerous.
They lose.
So when we had Brett Baier on yesterday to preview the big conversation with Kamala Harris, one of the things I noted is that what Brett Baier is really good when it comes down to the research. And we saw that yesterday because it was question after question based on her record and prior statements. And I got to be honest, she didn't meet the moment in the sense of having a response to those questions, but I think it was a better format for Kamala Harris versus some of the softball interviews that she's gotten. At least she rose to the occasion in the sense of wanting to fight back. And so if you're on the left, maybe you applaud her. But if you're someone that's been waiting for the big interview, then you thank Brett Baier for asking those tough questions.
I was glad he pressed her on, you've been the one that's been in office for 3.5 years. And then it was almost that moment where she said, but I haven't been to Europe either. When she said, but Donald Trump was running. He said, but you're the one in office. You're the one that we're turning to for change. You want to turn the page, but this is what you've stood for. He said in 2019, when you ran for president, you wanted to allow immigrants to apply for driver's licenses, free tuition, free health care. Do you still support that? Kamala said, that was 5 years ago. I will follow the laws. And then Brett said, but you chose Tim Walz as your running mate. And he signed all of this into state law. So do you support this? She hesitated and she said, we are clear. We will support federal law.
And that answer right there showed me that she still believed in providing all those handouts for immigrants. So as a lawyer, instead of answering yes or no, if she still agreed with that, her answer was, we will follow the law. Okay, so if they can legally write up all of those orders to bring immigrants over on airplanes and bring 30,000 of them and dump them into a small community or dump them in the Black communities in Chicago, they hand out free housing vouchers and free money to them that they didn't earn. They're not even citizens. If they could make it legal, then it's going to happen. And if you look back, they wrote up these little documents over the last 4 years, and that's how they've been bringing all these folks in here.
Right. And, you know,
which means nothing.
Right.
Yesterday when Brett was on with us, as you alluded to, Lawrence,
Change the law.
We talked a little bit about how she is a known filibusterer.
Yes.
And we saw it.
And as soon as he asked the first question and she went into an answer that we've heard a million times, it was like she was reading a teleprompter. About 20 seconds in, he tried to refocus her on the actual question. And it was back and forth the whole time. I'll tell you this, if you and your family set this up as a drinking game before it started, and you said, okay, every time she says Donald Trump, I'm going to take a shot, you would have been so
smashed.
Yeah,
smashed.
That's a good word. I would say 10 minutes in, because she, every time the going got tough, she went to Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I think the campaign said, We want to be able to say we've done a tough interview. Okay, they check that box. They also say, Tim Walz has done a couple of interviews on Fox News Sunday back to back. The campaign, Brian Fallon put out a statement and he said that they reached an audience last night that do not hear a lot directly from her, and she showed her toughness. So I think they think it was a win.
But the question that really I think is going to be played everywhere was when Brett Baier asked a direct question, when did you know about the diminished faculties of the current president of the United States?
And she turned to Donald Trump.
And she went to Donald Trump. And there was a huge pause there, as if she was not expecting that question. But the answer was not sufficient enough, especially when what we witnessed, Ainsley, on the debate stage.
Right. Well, and I was watching Brett last night on Sean's show, and Sean was saying, you were supposed to do this interview at 5. He said she didn't walk out until 5:17. She knew he had a live show at 6 o'clock.
Right.
She knew that he had to turn this. We had to get it into the tape room so that we could push play on that at 6 o'clock. She knew how stressful that would be for the staff, the team, and she knew she could eat into some of her time that she had promised Brett Baier. Brett said we were supposed to have 25 minutes, and she only gave us 20 minutes. And he said, I don't like interrupting, but I had to interrupt a lot because she was filibustering. She just kept talking and talking about things I wasn't necessarily asking her about. He said, so I had to interrupt. But he said, if I hadn't interrupted, we would have probably gotten 4 questions in, 5 minutes per question. He said, so I had 75 questions prepared.
Right. He was very well prepared, and he asked a lot of questions throughout the 26 minutes. One of the ways that Donald Trump has really made some hay in the last couple of weeks is with an ad talking about how she supports surgery for prisoners, gender-changing surgery. And he asked her about that. And once again, she started an answer and then she mentioned Donald Trump. Watch.
So are you still in support of using taxpayer dollars to help prison inmates or detained illegal aliens to transition to another gender?
I will follow the law. And it's a law that Donald Trump actually followed. You're probably familiar with, now it's a public report, that under Donald Trump's administration, these surgeries were available on a medical necessity basis to people in the federal prison system. And I think, frankly, that ad from the Trump campaign is a little bit of like throwing stones when you're living in a glass house.
The Trump aides say that he never advocated for that prison policy and no gender transition surgeries
you know what? You got to take responsible for what happened in your administration.
Yeah, no surgeries happened in his presidency.
It's in black and white.
Would you still advocate for using taxpayer dollars for gender reassignment
I will
surgeries?
follow the law.
That part was frustrating. This woman never answered any questions. Everything was, I will follow the law. She didn't even want to stand behind those policies that she said that she believed in, nor did she say what she would do as president when it came to those policies. Kamala said before she wanted every man in federal prison who wanted to turn into a woman. She wanted to provide transgender surgery for all of them, and she was going to use federal taxpayers' money to do it. But now she won't stand 10 toes down on that and tell the truth about what she's for. Instead, she's saying, I'll follow the law. She can move things around to make it a priority. Are you going to do that, Kamala, like you told the transgenders you would? Instead, she brought up Trump, who didn't have any of these surgeries during his presidency. She was basically just dodging and deflecting using Trump once again.
Obviously, she didn't answer, Ainsley, the yes or no question, which is, do you support taxpayer funds going to gender reassignment? But that, she always traps herself. That last line, you got to take responsibility for what happens in your administration. So the border, the 8-point-some million folks that have come across the border, the record inflation in this country, grocery prices going up, an economy that is not bouncing back. Maybe if you like the stock market, then you're happy with it. But if you're going to the grocery store, is she responsible since this is her administration?
Yeah, she keeps saying, I'll follow the law. I'll follow the law in the gender transitioning surgeries in prison. I'll follow the law when it comes to the border. Well, you have access to the law if you're the vice president. If you're running for president and you become president, you can change the laws. Right. There are executive orders, and they did away with most of Donald Trump's executive orders when it came to immigration. And Brett knows the facts, and Brett really pressed her on this and said, what about immigration? How many have crossed the border under your administration? She couldn't answer that. She pivoted and changed the subject. But she mentioned the amnesty bill again. And Brett said that would have given 11 million illegals amnesty, a pathway to citizenship. Because when she's asked about immigration, on day one, right after hours within us taking the oath, we tried to pass the U.S. Citizenship Act. And then that's when Brett said that would have allowed 11 million people to get citizenship. That's an amnesty bill. And then she started talking about the bipartisan border bill that Donald Trump blamed it on Donald Trump, that it never passed. And Brett said, but Democrats voted against it, and Democrats had problems with it. And that would have allowed 1.8 million illegals to be allowed in our country every year. That is not closing the border.
It's funny because Kamala said you have to take responsibility for what happens while you're in office. Well, she was appointed to be over the border in April 2021, and look at that disaster. So you would think that she'll be taking accountability for the border, but she never did. And that border crisis made an already pressing time worse for Americans, especially when we had to sit back and watch them give all our tax money to these illegals. That's the biggest slap in the face to all Americans, by the way. But I digress. Let's go ahead and get the conversation started. Do you think undecided voters saw
Hey, come see us on tour. We're going to be in Los Angeles, Columbus, Ohio, Dayton, Cleveland, Cincinnati, Lexington, Kentucky, Burbank, California, and Honolulu. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets. So I don't know if you heard this story. Kamala Harris very famously wanted to put the parents of kids who were truant in jail. And who are those kids? Poor kids and poor parents. And so she put somebody in jail whose kid had sickle cell anemia and was in the hospital.
And so had an excuse, right? They had they were allowed to be out.
So her name is Sherry Peoples, and her daughter has sickle cell anemia. Well, here, I'll show. Here we go. To this day, Kamala has never apologized for causing the single mom and her daughter to become homeless, while Shayla suffered from a stroke. Her daughter. So this woman has sickle cell. Her daughter has sickle cell anemia, so she couldn't go to school. Kamala Harris put her in jail when her kid's in the hospital. And to this day, she hasn't apologized for it. Her daughter is permanently disabled. Please watch this entire video so you can understand how this family struggled. Here we go. I want to watch it. Let's. Here we go.
My message to all Americans, especially Black Americans, do not trust Kamala Harris.
I'm so proud of you right now because you walked all the way down here and I wasn't expecting you to walk.
My daughter, Shayla, suffers from sickle cell anemia, a chronic, painful genetic disease.
As a prosecutor and law enforcement, I have a huge stick.
It's a very sharp stabbing pain, and it hurts a whole lot. Like from my chest all the way down, it hurts, including my side.
So I decided I was going to start prosecuting parents for truancy.
When Kamala Harris was the California Attorney General, she had me arrested and prosecuted because my handicapped daughter was sick in the hospital and had missed some days of school.
I spent a majority of my time here at the hospital.
Kamala's horrible policies hurt mothers like me and the Black community. My name is Reid Peoples, and this is my story. I am a single mother. I've worked as a certified nursing assistant and a caregiver. My daughter Shayla was born in 2002. When she was born, she was diagnosed with sickle cell anemia. And it affects all major organs in the body and also causes extreme pain. Her whole life, she has been on medications like morphine and Dilaudid to help her control the pain. In addition, she had to undergo blood transfusions every 3 weeks. My lifestyle became taking care of her almost full time. It is pretty typical for kids with Shayla disability to miss a lot of school.
I just got out of school. I've done 3 full days this week. Oh, I'm so tired.
And for years, the teachers were aware of her condition and her absences were all excused. California schools get their state and federal funding based off of average daily attendance. Schools are paid about $30 per student per day.
In San Francisco, we threatened the parents of truants with prosecution.
I first heard of Kamala Harris when she got elected California Attorney General.
We are putting parents on notice. We are going to make sure that you face the full force and consequences of the law.
She wrote a report saying truancy was costing California schools $1.4 billion a year in funding.
Because of truancy, California public schools lose $1.4 billion a year in funding. I want money.
What?
Kamala then wrote a law making it criminal for parents.
Why would they cut off funding to a school because of truancy?
So you get paid per student in the classroom. That's how it
What a great system we have.
Yeah, it's
a kid at that school to be miseducated.
Backward system. Okay.
If their kids miss school time. Kamala even wrote a book called Smart on Crime.
You can read an excerpt from the book that she just plugged shamelessly. It's called Smart on Crime.
Talking about arresting parents for truancy.
I sent a letter on my letterhead out to every parent in the public school system.
In 2012, like all California parents, I received a threatening letter from Kamala Harris saying we'll go to jail for a year if our kids even miss 10% of school days. It was like a crazy intimidation tactic.
I'm going to start prosecuting parents for truancy.
I thought, wow, this woman doesn't have any empathy. Is it because she's not a mother? I also thought, how could she not understand it would disproportionately affect people of color, single Black mothers? But honestly, I didn't imagine it could affect me. Her teachers had her medical records from the Children's Hospital.
Salute to our brother Ricardo dancing for the donation to the war chest. Revolution is a way of life. Absolutely appreciate the love, family. Salute.
I even had a 504 plan, which was an agreement between the school district and the parents to provide care for students with disabilities. It was April 18, 2013, in the morning. I'm in my pajamas. I had just fed my daughter, gave her medications, sent her off to school. Little did I know, there was a warrant out for my arrest. All of a sudden, the police is outside my house, and they started banging on the door. I opened up my door, and 2 officers entered my home. They told me I was under arrest for my child missing school. They said I was going to jail. I was shocked. I said, but my baby is sick. The school knows that. And they said, go talk to Kamala Harris. Place your hands behind your back.
My mom did nothing wrong. We did everything we were supposed to. I was always bringing doctor's notes, always calling the school to let them know that I was in the hospital.
Then they handcuffed me. So they take me outside for what you call a perp walk. And oh my God, the TV news was there. The newspapers were there. You could swear I had killed somebody.
You know,
it was
this is they gonna get some money one way or the other. So they got some money because every day you in jail, they get paid money. See, they just get money up out of us one way or the other. They need our asses locked up. They get paid for us in school or behind bars. They gonna make some money.
Degrading and humiliating. I was taken to the Criminal Justice Center. They took my mugshot. I was fingerprinted like a criminal, and I was terrified.
And it felt like I caused her so much pain because in reality, it is because of me, even though I know it's not directly my fault. Sorry.
The next day, the Orange County Register showed the pictures of my arrest. They even had a close-up picture of my hands in handcuffs to show here's a Black mother being arrested.
It was a truancy rate at over 2.5 times that of white students.
Everyone knew most truant kids were Black. I think Kamala Harris wanted me as an example to threaten other single Black mothers, like this can happen to you if you don't get your kids in class. The police even put out a press release naming me and other Black single mothers like Toya Daniels who got arrested the same day. But my hell was just beginning. They gave me 2 charges: failure to supervise and encourage school attendance and contributing to the delinquency of a minor. I couldn't believe it. They framed my daughter as a gang member and basically charged me with neglect. I spent the next 2 years in court fighting these charges. Kamala assigned her nastiest prosecutors to my case.
My homicide prosecutors, my gang prosecutors. And they went over there and I said, when you go over there, look really mean.
Like 10 different prosecutors. They kept pressuring me to plead guilty and spend a year in jail. But I kept refusing because I did nothing wrong. All the time, I had to spend going to court. I was struggling to care for my child. I lost my job and couldn't pay rent, and we got evicted. I became homeless. We had to move into a motel.
And I ended up being in the hospital a lot during her trial. And in that hospital stay was when I had my stroke. I had a stroke about 4 or 5 days ago. And right now I'm doing pretty good. My hand is doing okay, I guess.
In 2015, after 2 years, they finally just gave up and dismissed my case. In 2018, the Supreme Court of California ruled that truancy cannot be punished by incarceration. It was unconstitutional. The courts finally stopped Kamala Harris' abuses. When I look back, I ask, why did Kamala Harris arrest me? Why was Kamala Harris so insensitive to a Black woman with a handicapped child? Well, first, I learned that Kamala Harris has no common experience with Black people. She grew up with an Indian mother. I remember she kept saying she was Indian.
To become the first Indian senator in U.S. history, which would be quite an accomplishment.
Not good. What we're going to cook today is an Indian recipe. Yes, because you are Indian. Yes.
And I learned she grew up in Canada.
That actress that she's with, I can't remember her name from The Office.
Mindy
Kaling. You know her brother is famous. Her Indian brother is famous for faking that he was Black to get a Black scholarship to med school.
No.
Yeah.
That woman?
Her brother.
Her
brother shaved his head and pretended he was Black so he could get into med school. That's a famous story. So it's like a real exchange program. Kamala's pretending she's Black now.
Wow.
We're gonna cook today. Is an Indian recipe. Yes, because you are Indian.
And I learned she grew up in Canada, not in the United States, and went to a wealthy high school. I think in Canada, she must not have been exposed to American values, which respects the rights of individuals. When Kamala Harris ran for president in 2019, they asked her about arresting people like me, and she just lied her ass off.
The truancy program got a lot of criticism too. Did you actually lock anybody up?
No, we never locked anybody up. We never sent a parent to jail, and no parent went to jail. And we did prosecute some cases, but far few, only about 20.
It's ironic because Kamala helped raise money to bail out murderers, rioters, and thieves. But she thought I belonged in jail because I had a handicapped child.
To this day, at 22 years old, I suffer from full paralysis on my right arm and partial in my right leg.
Kamala Harris owes me an apology and my daughter an apology for what she did to us.
So do you think that she'll ever be asked about that in an interview? No. Charlemagne the God didn't know anything about it. He let her skate.
He don't want
It's easy to suppress things.
They never brought that up on any of the debates.
He didn't know. Why would you take the time to? There's all kinds of stuff nobody knows. I find out when I tell people, and they go, "What? That can't be real."
And then and these, these
salute.
Thomas Frank talked about this in Listen Liberal. He talked about the sanctimony and the virtue signaling, and the superior morality that they project, the liberal class, and he said it is stomach churning. And that's what I find in my ex-friend Vance from comedy, and it's just stomach churning. They're stupid on purpose. They believe what they hear from the TV, and they champion people like Kamala Harris like it makes them a better person. And they're horrible people. These people are in effect horrible people.
Yeah, they're the lowest shit that ever lived. Mindy Kaling, you're Indian, right? I promise you, people that know her and her are pretending she's Black right now. And by the way, I don't really give a shit either way. Here's what makes her unfit on the face of it. She grew up in Canada. What that woman said is dead right.
That's right.
I don't want anybody who grew up in Canada being the president of the United States. That's why she didn't bring up the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, when she was talking about Trump's a danger. And by the way, that bullshit she was talking about where Trump said terminate the Constitution, that entirely related to the 2020 election where he said it was a fraud. And that's what they're talking about. So you're not supposed to care about this woman and her daughter who's paralyzed. You're supposed to give a fuck about the 2020 election with Larry Clown-haired David and the gang.
So imagine if Trump had done that to a Black mother. You would never hear the end of it, and people would use that as a reason why Trump's a horrible person.
Well, here's the good news.
You don't even get to hear about this story. They don't even talk about this story. You have to come to a Rumble and a podcaster to hear this story.
Yeah, you don't live in China. You live in America, the free country that with democracy. That's why you're not allowed to openly tell the truth on all the platforms. Because it's a private business and they can do whatever they want. Except Elon Musk. He should go to jail.
Because the barrel she knew Well, I am not quite sure what to say here, other than I humbly submit myself for your consideration to receive a Pulitzer Prize, maybe Time Person of the Year, a Golden Globe, a Grammy, something. I deserve something for my staunch commitment to the defense of Janet Jackson, because guess what has happened? And by the way, this is not even unbelievable. It's actually the most believable thing in the world. A Jamaican woman has stepped forward who I can verify to you knew Kamala's grandma Beryl. And she remembers her affectionately, by the way. Apparently, Grandma Beryl was a wonderful woman. She adored Kamala's grandma Beryl. It was just one minor detail that was off. You see, the Beryl that she knew, the one that Kamala presented in her book, was not her, because the Beryl she knew was white. Yeah, let's get started. Welcome back to Candace. All right, so all of this was really just common sense. I know it's not that common anymore, but it really was common sense from the beginning. And I want people to know, let the record show, let the history books show, that all I did was conduct basic Black people science. I looked at this photo here, the photo that Kamala put in her book of her and Grandma Beryl, and I said, no, scientific consensus rejects this theory for a ton of reasons. One of them being, I just didn't feel like this woman was her grandma. I have a Caribbean grandma. They're all up in your face. I don't feel the affection in this photo. I'm not thinking this is a very dark woman. I'm not thinking this is the mother of Donald Harris at all. Like, I know genetics can be funky, but I was going, this woman does not look like she owned and operated a store. There were so many things that were throwing me off. Even the whole story of the grandparents owning all of these stores. I'm going, what are you talking about? 1914 to 1938 in Jamaica, but we were just getting out of slave chains. And you're telling me like your family just became like so dominant and we're running these dry goods stores and this grandma had that. Something was off, okay? And what was off was just the photos they were presenting. These people were too Black. And then once we started looking into it, the fact that her campaign just shut off the tap on speaking about her Blackness. They just wanted to move on as if she had never said it. It was the entire brand. Remember, that's the pitch. She's going to be the first Black female president of the United States. The media was trying to sell that, to force feed that to us. And I said, Black scientific theory says, no, this ain't your grandma. But I was receiving a ton of emails from people that were insisting that Beryl was Kamala's grandmother. Among the emails were a flurry of people suggesting that I speak to a woman known as Lady Colin Campbell. She also goes as Lady C. I'm familiar with her work. I've seen her. She's written in the Daily Mail before, or has been written about in the Daily Mail. She's a British Jamaican author and a socialite who grew up in Jamaica. And she is deep on genealogy. She's written several books regarding the British royals. This woman likes history. She likes facts. And someone had sent me a clip of her from her YouTube channel during which she was fielding questions and people were asking her to look into my research into Kamala Harris. And she said, rather offhandedly, that she had asked around and that she had a friend that was on the island who had confirmed to her that Beryl was in fact Kamala's grandmother, seemingly putting to rest all of my theories. But I remained completely undeterred and I just ignored it. Lady C said that she was hoping to host that friend on her podcast in the future, and that the woman would spill all of the tea on how she knew Kamala's grandmother, Beryl. So I just waited. I waited for the future to arrive, and guess what? The future has arrived. And as promised, Lady C hosted Dorothy, that's the woman's name, Dorothy, the woman who knew Grandma Beryl. And I will tell you, the conversation did not go as Lady C expected. I think primarily because people who did not watch every episode of this series into Kamala were not quite understanding what we were uncovering. There were all of these people making response videos. I was going, you clearly did not watch everything that we're doing. We never said that Beryl did not exist. We always believed that Beryl existed. We simply did not believe that the woman that was presented in Kamala's book was her. We believed that this was a case of stolen identity. Essentially, there was a Beryl, but the woman that was being pictured was not the grandma, and they were playing funny business like commies do, switching identities. And it was strange that even though Kamala presented a picture of Grandma Beryl in the book, she didn't mention her at all in the book. What's up with that? You're just trying to blackify yourself. But Lady C likes research. Lady C was good on her word. She hosted Dorothy. So let's watch the first part of their conversation. This is Dorothy, again, the Jamaican woman who grew up and knew Grandma Beryl, Miss Beryl, personally. Take a listen.
Greetings from Castle Goring, from Mickey, Aurora, and from me. We have a special guest with us today, Dorothy Otti, who is an old friend of mine. She's Jamaican, and she used to know Miss Beryl very well. They grew up in the same village.
Well, I grew up in the village where Miss Beryl lived. She was a lot older than me, of course. And Miss Beryl was the grandmother of Vice President Kamala Harris.
Yes.
And she was just the most delightful lady. I have such fun memories of her. Excuse me. So there's a sweet that you have in Jamaica as a child, or grown-ups eat the sweet that's made from coconuts and caramelized sugar, and it's called a buster. Have you ever had?
Darling, in my day it was called Bustamante Backbone.
Okay, so it was called a buster. And Miss Beryl had a shop. And in the mornings, my Uncle Cecil would take me by the hand. We'd go up the road for a walk. And on the way, everyone that goes past, it would be, "Good morning, Mas Cecil. And how are you, Miss Dar?" And by the time we got to Miss Beryl's shop, she would either offer me a buster or this other delicious sweet called a paradise plum.
Yes, I remember paradise.
Yeah,
plums.
but Miss Beryl, she was just so lovely. We would have these conversations as a little girl whenever I went past with Uncle Cecil, and it was always, "How are you doing with your books? Are you reading? Are you learning your times table?" Of course, she was a businesswoman. So she was very good at things like mathematics, of course. And she was, looking back now, you could see she was a trailblazer. Because the shop that she had, she actually built it herself. So we lived in a village, and her shop was the only what you would call an upstairs, downstairs house. All the other houses were like bungalows on one level with gardens and stuff. I remember in our garden, we had gladiolas.
Okay, a couple of things flagged to me as interesting there. So she was really good at mathematics. Okay, so we're talking about a Black person. Again, this would not have been more than a couple of decades removed from slavery. And she was really good at mathematics, extremely well read, owned and operated a shop, and had the biggest house. What are we talking about? This doesn't feel like the correct kind of a Black story that I'm used to. A couple of generations ago, you go back, most Black people have my grandparents' sharecropping farm. I mean, who knows? I'm like, okay, Very clearly, though, we know she's telling the truth right away because this is a good fact check against what Donald Harris wrote when he wrote a story about their Jamaican heritage for Jamaican Online Global. And he talked about those bustas. He talked about him and his sister Enid and how they loved the bustas. I think he said it was around Easter time. So everything she's saying sounds correct. But it was this part, this next part, that instantly let me know that this woman was the real deal because she presents a detail, something that I know to be a fact that I had not ever presented to the public. Remember when I told you that I got on the phone with a family member of Kamala Harris, and that family member told me that Donald Harris had 2 siblings, Enid Harris, who I have spoken to you guys about, and another sibling who I had never mentioned. It was Beryl's son, and his name was Kenneth. And this woman starts speaking about the Kenneth that I had never mentioned, who would be Donald Harris's brother. Take a listen.
Was it a village or was it a hamlet? How many people would have been in it? How many houses? How many residents?
So at one time, everyone that lived there, was a village. There was probably about 80 or 90 people. But at one time, everyone that lived there was a relative of mine.
Really?
Yes.
What about Miss Beryl?
So this would have been before people such as Miss Beryl moved there. But before that, everyone who lived there, and even as a child growing up, most of the residents were connected in some way on my father's side, my grandfather's side, where they were all related. But Miss Beryl, my darling, also had a son. He was called Kenneth. And Kenneth had a motorbike, the equivalent of what we would now call a Harley Davidson. And of course, so at the time I would have been no more than 4 or 5. I'm not interested in what make your bike is. And he would put me on the front of the bike, whenever I came past with Uncle Cecil, and I would sit there and he would switch the engine on. And of course, looking back now, I realize the bike never moved, but he just held on to me. And I thought I was riding a bike, and I grew up absolutely loving motorbikes. He was very handsome.
Oh, Beryl must have had some money. Her son has the equivalent of a Harley Davidson. He was very handsome. He's got riding around on his motorbike. What are we talking about here? Like I said, this is when I knew that this woman was dialed in because I had never spoken about Kenneth publicly, not for any particular reason. I just literally hadn't gotten around to it as I've been collecting all of this evidence to present to the public on Kamala's family and looking into Enid and looking into Kenneth. So very interesting. Again, sounds like this Beryl had a lot of money. It's just not giving the person that is pictured in Kamala's book. Now, of course, naturally, Kamala Harris then comes up in this conversation. And Dorothy keeps this same positive energy. She's very positive, right? She has a spirit about her. She has this fond memory, delightful. She's delightful in her approach about Beryl. And she's delightful in her approach about Kamala. And Kamala's features. She really likes Kamala's facial features. I'll tell you why. Take a listen.
And Miss Beryl, by the way, I see Vice President Harris on the box. And I sit up straight and I think, my God, she looks so much like Miss Beryl. Her facial features. The only thing is Miss Beryl was much smaller in stature, but
well, okay, if Miss Beryl, because Kamala is very fair-skinned.
Right.
Was Beryl fair-skinned?
Yes, she was.
She was?
She was. She was fair-skinned.
She was? Okay.
Yes, she was very fair-skinned.
Oh.
With black hair.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
So she was so fair-skinned that now that I'm older and I can spot people by their skin coloring, etc., for me, I would say there was something Irish there.
How interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say somewhere along the line, she would have had ancestors that were Irish. Yes.
Actually, can I show you a photograph?
Of course.
Of an old lady.
Yes.
And some people speculate that this is Miss Baier.
Right.
So, sorry,
that's okay.
I am so untechnological.
Okay.
It's just pathetic.
Yeah.
There we go.
Okay. Nah, that's not Miss Baier.
That's not Miss
That's
Baier.
definitely not Miss Baier.
Okay.
That's not Miss Baier.
So,
and
let me just show you.
Yeah.
So,
that is not Miss Baier.
That's not Miss Baier.
Definitely not Miss Baier.
Okay.
And I
Black lady.
know what she looks like.
Grandma.
I couldn't have been in a dream, and she definitely did not look like that.
There's another person, but could that be Miss Baier?
No, that's not
That's
Miss
not
Baier.
Miss Baier
That's
either.
not Miss Baier either.
Okay.
Don't know who that is.
Okay.
That's not Miss Beryl. That ain't Miss Beryl. You know, as you were describing the fair skin and looking like Kamala, I was thinking this can't be the Miss Beryl grandma that's in Kamala's book. And clearly you see Lady C's going, wait, fair skin? What? Maybe is this? Nope, that's not Miss Beryl. I didn't dream. That's not Miss Beryl. Yeah, that sounds about right. You're saying Irish. And that's funny because Judge Joe Brown had a very distinct memory that Donald Harris told him that he was Irish and Hindu. And things are starting to add up, not in Kamala Harris's favor. And I don't know what to say here, ladies and gentlemen, other than I am truly, untypically speechless. I don't think I possess within me the adequate vocabulary to discuss my distaste for a woman who borrowed a Black person for her autobiography.
Put a Black person
so that she could secure the Black vote.
It's not.
Do you understand how fundamentally racist that is? Do you understand how despicable that is? I mean, you have to be the worst kind of political vermin to borrow a Black person to put in your book to present to the public as your grandma, who definitively was not your white Irish grandma. Okay, I don't have the word. I need someone to throw me a thesaurus so I can find it. I need to expand my vocabulary to be able to legitimately express my disgust for Kamala Harris and my now general disgust for any person who supports this woman or from here on out purports that she is the first Black anything, okay? She is beyond despicable. This woman has no soul. You have to have no soul to do that. And if my instincts are correct, the person that she is showing is indeed someone she knows and is likely, like I said from the very beginning, the help. The help who would have taken on the name of the people who they worked for. It's very common. This is why you talk about having slave names. You take on the last name, the first name. When we saw that woman who was listed looking for a housekeeper position that said Beryl or Christie, it is my suspicion that this was the help, meaning this was likely the woman that was working for the wealthy Miss Beryl who was buying her children Harley Davidsons. I mean, it's just, this is unbelievable. This should end her chances at the White House. If we have any sort of moral sensibility in this country, you would never allow a person like this to assume office, because if she is willing to lie like this, if she is willing to, this is essentially the worst kind of blackface. Okay. This is what you are seeing now. Kamala Harris is in fact a minstrel show. She said, I'm running for president. Okay, what am I going to do? I'm just going to blackify myself. Fake aunties, fake uncle photos. Oh, I actually just called them. What is she going to say to this? Is she going to come out now and say, oh, when I said Grandma Beryl, I meant like that's just what we called her affectionately, Grandma Beryl, as she was doing our laundry and picking up after us. We called her. What is she going to say? That is possibly going to be accepted? And will the press do their job now? Stop pretending this is a conspiracy and recognize that this woman put on blackface because she wants to win the election. Megan Thee Stallion, I'm calling you, every person who twerked, danced, applauded, said to the public, this is a Black woman. It is now incumbent upon you to take a step back, examine what we have revealed, and to take it back. Take everything you said back about this woman. Apologize for platforming her, for believing this. It's fine. I'll accept the apology, but keep the exact same energy. Oh, she's Black. Okay. Now that you know that she's not, you should be angry and you should present these facts to the public and to your followers and to your fan base. Like I said, I am shocked. I'm not shocked, but I am shocked. You know what I'm saying? Like, I am not surprised. It was inevitable. I was never going to let go. Like, I pretty much knew that I was on the right track. Her silence about the matter was deafening. The removal of everything seemed very suspicious. No longer speaking about her Blackness seemed very suspicious. Now she's too highbrow. I'm not even going to address it. You know why you're not going to address it? Because you're not Black. You are not Black. You never have been Black a day in your life. You truly disgust me. I want you to know that you are filth. Kamala Harris is filth. And Lady C was similarly shocked, gobsmacked, as she put it. Take a listen.
And gobsmacked. Absolutely gobsmacked. And it then begs the question, did she seriously think she was going to be able to get away with this?
She did.
I mean, I know Candace Owens has been going hell for leather on this, and Candace Owens is clearly Black. So this is not about anti-Blackness, because as you could see, Dorothy is not white. So, I mean, I'm just stunned that any ambitious politician would present as a grandparent of hers, and Kamala Harris is very fair-skinned, whether she calls herself Black or brown, she's still fair-skinned. But she definitely has Black blood. So to that extent, it's not anything artificial. What does seem to be extraordinary is the creation of a Black grandmother when her grandmother was of color, but wasn't Black. And she just, did she get somebody off the street and pop them in the photograph? Was it a helper? Who was this woman? I mean, it boggles the imagination.
Don't you worry. Leave it with me, Lady C. From one Lady C to another, I'm going to get to the bottom of who that woman is in the picture, and I'm going to get to the bottom of who the Irish barrel actually is, because here's what happens now. Blood is in the water, my friends, okay? If you watch the full interview, you should cut over to Lady C's YouTube channel and watch the entire thing. That woman gave a ton of accidental clues about the Irish barrel that we are now looking for. She excelled at mathematics. She built a home. She resembles Kamala Harris. She had Black hair. She owned a store which specialized in making bustas. Now we can refocus our attention and look for the true barrel, the white-looking barrel. And we are going to be able to find that person. I sense it. Now, like I said, there is way too much information out there. And we need to put tremendous amounts of pressure for Kamala Harris to respond. Because like I said, you have to be borderline psychopathic to do what she did. Do you understand? Like, just take a pause here and recognize how demented you have to be. Okay, to approve the printing of a book with a photo featuring a photo of who you purport is your grandma barrel, you standing next to a woman who was likely cleaning your dirty underwear. Okay, likely. That's what I think. I feel it in my soul that that's who these women were that were pictured in here. This woman doesn't recognize Iris. Grandma Iris was the second photo she showed. We zoomed in on it. She doesn't recognize anyone. Dorothy's going, I don't know who these people are. Okay. You have to be utterly demented, hell-bent on power. You will stop at nothing to achieve power if you have no shame. If you have no shame, knowing that you come from a long line of slave owners, that you would then appropriate the identity of a real Black woman so that you can what? Re-enslave Black people in America today. That's exactly why she's doing it. She is disturbed, okay? Like I said, this is now a beginning. We get to refocus our attentions. I have a ton of suspicions. I truly believe that I was on the right track when I examined the same thing for Christiana Brown. I believe they're lying about who Christiana Brown is. And I'm going to find both of these women. What do we have? 18, 19 days until the election. I'm not letting go, guys. I am just email me if you find any information, info@CandaceOwens.com. You know where we will be. This woman is not going to get away with this. I'm disgusted. All right, guys.
Of disinformation. You even got Trump's hair on your head. What kind of a person are you, Joy Reid? Joyless Reid. This show is brought to you by Patreon.com, Tim's Take Live. That's where you go to become a member of Tim Black on Patreon. And if you're not a subscriber, please subscribe to the channel. Joy Reid and the Democratic Party and the Kamala Harris campaign are in panic mode.
At this point, you can't call what Trump is running a campaign. As friend of the show David Corn points out in Mother Jones, what Trump and J.D. Vance and House and Senate Republicans are running is a massive disinformation campaign aimed at warping Americans' reality.
David Corn is a hack.
And they're doing it with violent, terrifying, and sometimes bizarre conspiracy theories that set the table for maybe armed resistance to a Kamala Harris win.
Armed resistance? Man, somebody needs to come get Joy and throw her into a psychiatric ward. Let's throw her into a psychiatric ward. She gets to say this. Listen to her words. Listen to what she says here.
And they're doing it with violent, terrifying, and sometimes bizarre conspiracy theories that set the table for maybe armed resistance to a...
That maybe armed resistance. Maybe armed resistance. Man, Joy Reid, I've been telling you guys, Joy Reid is the biggest hack on cable news. She is the absolute worst person. She takes the trophy. She's the Sha'Carri Richardson of lunacy on cable news media. She is, man, she's way in front of everybody, man. She could come from behind and you think somebody else is going to win, like a Rachel Maddow or something. You're like, no, man, Rachel Maddow is crazy as hell. And all of a sudden, here comes Joy. Pew! Like, Jesus Christ, she's the craziest. It ain't even close, baby.
Kamala Harris win or mass acceptance of American fascism. Trump and Republicans backed by far right-wing billionaires like Elon Musk and right-wing media and anti-woman manosphere podcasts are...
As long as you got Soros and Bill Gates, I mean, you can't talk shit, can you? I mean, really, can you? Can you really talk when you got your own billionaires? Like, both sides have billionaires. You know, why come the Democrats can't keep it real? Democrats got billionaires that give them money. Trump used to give you money. You gave to both sides. Why is it that they act like they aren't the ones taking money too? The Democrats are just as corrupt and even more corrupt because they pick the primaries for you. They don't even let you pretend to pick your own people. They pick them for you and tell you, we know what's better for you. We know what's good for you. That's the Democrats.
Creating social media or gaming social media apps like X Twitter in Trump's favor and pumping disinformation into the brains of Trump supporters.
Oh, you mean sort of like the way you guys ran a disinformation campaign about Russia? Remember that? Russia, come and get us. Oh no, Russia stole the election. You remember 2016? Because Hillary couldn't get her ass out the chair and go down to Michigan
You guys, the Russians took it. The Russians stole the election. Oh no, Russians and the Chinese and Facebook. Remember that? Everyone forgets that, okay? And us social media users know damn well which side of the aisle catches most hell on social media. It's only one platform, really, one or two. X and like Rumble and Truth Social that you can go to where like conservative or anti-democrat is tolerated, because Facebook is not. TikTok is scared as hell. When I'm on TikTok and I talk about anything political, they suppress the shit out of that. If it's anti-Kamala, oh, the only time they give me any play is if it's very neutral. And since I don't put out any positive content about the Democratic Party, because there's nothing positive about the Democratic Party that I care to say. So basically what we have is, we have Joy Reid up here complaining that what they've been doing for the last 10 years has finally been done to them on X. Yeah, they have a problem when it was on this Twitter, and Twitter was suppressing anything that was anti-Democrat. Now they got a problem. Notice she ain't gonna talk about Facebook or Instagram. No, she won't mention those two, because we all know they favor the liberals.
Not quite foreign interference, but not exactly different from what Vladimir Putin would do.
It's a private company, right? Isn't that what you said when we complained about it? When we complained about Twitter, when it was owned by the guy with the beard? It's a private company. They can do what they want to do. Kick Trump off. Remember that? But now, it ain't no fun when the rabbit got the gun, is it? I'm hunting rabbits. Man, there's some bogus. I told y'all, man, Joy Reid is the king of hypocrites. The woman king of hypocrites.
And in many ways, the disinformation campaign is working. Base Republicans today believe everything from Democrats secretly manipulating the weather from a secret base in Alaska to Trump being incapable of losing this election. He's winning in a landslide.
He is winning in a landslide. He is. Case in point. Why is Kamala trying to go on Joe Rogan's show after she shit on him? How could you shit on Joe Rogan and then begging Joe Rogan to take her on the show? Man, come on. That is obvious. That's obvious that she's behind. I mean, she's got to beg. If I was Joe, I'd make her do it publicly. Gather around, people. Gather around. Let's watch VP Harris write me a kind letter of apology. Because she was one of the people shitting on him. But now that she needs him, hi, Joe. Hey, Joe, we did it. What you talk about, Kamala?
And some Democrats are starting to believe the disinformation too.
Uh-oh. Joy Reid is a walking pile of disinformation. With a Trump, you even got Trump's hair on your head. What kind of a person are you, Joy Reid? Joyless Reid. Joyless Reid, that's what she is, Joyless Reid.
Have you noticed how sharply the polls have shifted in Trump's favor over the last couple weeks? With these claims that Trump is surging with Black and Latino voters, and
he's doing pretty well. They say Trump is doing better with Black people than any other president on the Republican side since 1960. What can Kamala say? What has Kamala done? Has she done anything that's worth bragging? Oh, I know. Candidate most likely to choke off of her own word salad on national TV. Candidate more likely to pretzel bend her way into contortionist positions by kissing her own butt cheeks on national TV. Candidate most likely to be a walking contradiction. First candidate to ever say they're the change candidate, and then when asked, what would you change, says, I can't think of a thing. There's nothing that comes to mind. That's kind of embarrassing, Johnson. Oh, and then you're going to say it's a conspiracy theory to say Trump is blowing that person out. That's rich, baby. That's rich.
Leading in every single swing state, according to secret internal polls, despite all the Hitler talk.
Oh, now Joy is claiming that everybody's against Kamala. Uh-oh. Hey, man. I was looking at research like a month ago. It shows CBS and ABC, for instance, those two networks, and NBC, not MSNBC, but NBC, were running in the high 80s and low 90s of all positive coverage of Kamala Harris. Yeah, they covered her positively almost 90%. And it was the opposite with Trump. High 80s to low 90s of negative coverage for Trump. All positive for Kamala, all negative for Trump. And now they're not running positive coverage of Trump. They're just running some obvious truths that turn out to be negative for Kamala. But they're not running positive for Trump. So Kamala still has positive shit running, but also now some reality checks like, hey, she was up 5 and now it's even, which really means Trump's up by 4 because he underperforms, he underpolls. Because people have been conditioned not to admit that they're going to vote for Trump. This has been historical with Trump. Trump has been the nominee 3 times. So we have data that proves this. We have data that proves this. But see, you listen to Joy Reid, you know what you have, guys? You have the pot calling the kettle black. Yeah, we got the pot calling the kettle black. We got someone who's a part of a whole system that have been doing the same thing that they claim others are doing. MSNBC, MSDNC, has been doing the thing that she says NPR is doing. MSDNC has been doing the thing that she says the New York Times is doing. MSDNC is doing the very thing that they're accusing Axios is doing, which is having a favorite. Joy Reid has never said a positive thing about Trump, ever. And she's been reporting on him for 10 years. She just said Trump is trying to get his followers to commit physical violent acts if he loses. She just said that. But she used the word maybe, so she can't get sued. Maybe Trump is trying to, I mean, what kind of a maybe? Joy Reid is a Jaguar right of corporate news media. Okay? Let's keep going.
Yes, this race will be far too close. Because unfortunately, we do have a fascist groundswell in parts of this country, mainly among white men, let's be clear, but in small pockets among black and brown men too.
Okay, so there's no black women voting for Trump. You know, there's something to be said about Joyless Reid. First of all, projection. Yeah. I think it's a fascist to try to dictate people's thoughts. Yeah, trying to tell other people what to think and what to do and how to feel. Like you want to psychologically control the masses with your propaganda, Joy. I think that's a form of fascism too. Didn't fascists try to control the messaging? That sounds like what you try to do every day. Listen, guys, for the record, there are a lot of people that aren't voting for Kamala Harris, and that doesn't mean they're fascists. And not only black men aren't voting for Kamala in the numbers they want, of course there are going to be black men that vote for her, because not all of them will wake up in time. But there are a lot of black women that are not going to vote for Kamala. And guess what? That doesn't make them fascists either. It means they have good taste. That means they've been paying attention. That's how I look at it. And also, they're exercising their First Amendment right. They're making their own choices, whether I agree with them or don't agree with them. I tend to think that Kamala is the greater evil, just because look at all the assholes she got with her.
This happens to be a global phenomenon as women become more economically independent and seek positions of power. But friend of the show, Simon Rosenberg, points out that just like in 2020 and 2022, dozens of right-wing polls have been dumped into the marketplace in the last few weeks, 12 in Pennsylvania alone. Those polls then swing the polling averages to the right.
So you're saying that Trump is not polling well? Really? Well, it doesn't matter, because when Kamala loses, then you'll have to shut the hell up, right? I don't even see why this is an argument. And all this, what are you doing with this propaganda BS? Trying to make people think that all of a sudden America, that like the powers that be, the corporate media structure is now supporting Trump. I mean, guys, she's trying to sell a narrative that Trump is benefiting from corporate media. That the people that have been riding his ass for the last 10 years decided last week, we like Trump. Is that what you're trying to say, Joy? Because that don't make no damn sense. Trump has been getting negative coverage all this time. If you look, it's like this, man. It's much pro-Kamala Harris, pro-Democrat, like push in the media. As much of that has gone on, if you are crying foul from the Democratic Party side, you just a damn fool. I don't know a better way to put this. You are obviously afraid you're losing. I'm just going to chop it up to that. You know you're losing because you're doing this segment because you know you're losing. Because there is no way you could ever say that Trump is the one who's not getting getting preferential treatment. You mean the guy that had 2 attempts on his life? You mean the guy that was impeached twice? You mean the guy that's been raked over the coals, the guy with all the indictments? That's the guy you're saying gets preferential treatment from the media? I don't know. I don't know. For some reason, I'm not buying it. Oh, I know why. Because I'm not a damn moron. Yeah. I'm not psycho. You know? I'm not a delusional misfit. Yeah, I'm not a hack like you, Joy, because that's the only way you can believe that. I mean, logically, it makes no sense. The guy has been dragged across the coals of corporate media for 10 years. And all because your girl, your woman, your Madam VP, is getting her clock cleaned, you want to claim victim. She wasn't a victim when she was, I'm speaking. Okay. Now she a victim now. Yeah, she behind in the polls, y'all. That's how I'm saying it, guys. That's one of the reasons why I'm pretty sure. Like, I'm 99% sure my polling is right, because look at the way they're acting. How could you, with a straight face, tell the world that you think Trump's getting preferential or favorite treatment? Preferential treatment for Trump from media? From media, not from Newsmax. Maybe from Newsmax. News Nation. But you mean like corporate media? Come on, man. Nobody believes that shit. Man, please hit the like button, guys. Please hit the like button, man. Do you think, and let's start a poll. Hit the like button if you haven't hit the like button yet. Give me a 0 if you think Joy Reid is out her tree. Yeah, if you think Joy Reid is smoking some of that good and it was too good. If you think Joy Reid's had too many bottles of wine tonight. If you think Joy Reid done lost her damn mind, give me a 0. If you think she's on to something, give me a 1. I got a feeling it's going to be a lot of zeros. Wow. Unbelievable.
Making Trump look strong and Kamala Harris look stalled. Now, there are lots of explanations for why you'd want to game the polls. Entrepreneurial Republican pollsters can certainly game
the polls. What Joy Reid is doing here, guys, it's not something new. There's a lot of phrases for it. One of them is, every thief thinks everyone steals. Yeah. Every thief thinks everybody steals. And that's what Kamala people are doing. That's what Joy Reid's people are doing. They're all thieves. MSDNC is a bunch of thieves trying to steal every election. The Democratic Party trying to steal every election. I'm not saying the Republicans don't do dirt, but what I'm saying is a thief is always looking at people like they're stealing because that's what they would do. And it's what they've been doing. Joy and Reid, this is disgusting of you, but it's very telling. Yo, there's no reason why. Look, I'm not the only person who's going to see it this way. So why would they be exposing themselves like this? I mean, only the most diehard, brainwashed MSDNC watchers are listening to this going, she's on to something. Because they know. They've been seeing negative Trump coverage forever. I mean, there are people, no matter what Trump does, they never will give him credit for it. Because they've heard so many negative things about Trump. Trump could save a family of 4 from a building. And there were people that would be like, he probably the one that set the fire. That's what Trump derangement syndrome is. It's like, they just believe like there is no way, right? I'm a person that says, Trump ain't a saint, but I still believe he's just one guy. The Democratic Party is a whole lot of people. And they're a crooked institution. When you would spend so much time being dishonest yourself, you see dishonesty in everyone else. It's sort of like a person who's cheating, who swears to God that their spouse is cheating because they know what they're doing. And it's sort of like the karma, not the Kamala, the karma. You know, like you are projecting onto them what's already in you. That's why it's good not to be a part of that shit. Joy Reid is obviously projecting. The Democratic Party is projecting.
Favor with Trump, who's apparently fuming about Vice President Harris's billion-dollar fundraising and positive press. And then there's the more sinister explanation that if Trump, Republican pollsters, and even jittery Democrats convince enough people that his victory is inevitable, how much easier would it be?
Yeah, that sounds exactly what you guys were doing with Kamala Harris. You mean to tell me, guys, that these people want us to believe that they weren't patting the books with Kamala this whole time? I mean, come on, guys. Before Kamala ran, people were saying that they need to take her off the ticket. They were saying that she was dragging down Biden. Like no one wanted her to run. They all said she's the reason why she's part of the reason why Biden was doing bad. People said that she added nothing to the ticket, that she was horrible. And then all of a sudden when Biden dropped out, you guys are like, she's amazing, she's a rock star. That was that you guys trying to manipulate perception in order to help get the outcome you wanted? I mean, come on now, you don't think that the people's opinion of her changed overnight? And no way did your opinion change overnight. You just figured, fake it till you make it. Yeah, we gonna fake it. If we keep on faking it, maybe she'll make it. That's exactly what you did, but now listen to Joy. Now she's projecting that on the other people. Now she's projecting that onto the Republicans. But the thing is, the Republicans don't own the media. Guys, I said this in 2016 because it was true. There were journalists that were caught up in WikiLeaks. And before they did stories on Hillary Clinton, they would send their stories to the Clinton campaign and get the approval first. Hey, it was actual journalists sending their story to the Hillary camp, making any changes. Is this okay? Before they went to press. Do you really think that the NPR, New York Times, or Axios is sending articles to the Trump campaign before they print them? Come on, guys. Really? Really? Joy Reid she is something else, man. I mean, she is a brazen. I gotta admit, she works hard for the money. Because to lie like this and not wear a rubber hat, because the lightning should be tearing her ass up right now.
To claim that the election was stolen if he loses. And how much easier would it be to get his base to rise up and maybe even get violent the way they did?
That's her third time saying she wants his. This is 3 times in a row, 3 times in this short segment. She's claimed that Trump's trying to get his base to get violent. Not that he's trying to win, like Kamala's trying to win, but he's trying to make them get violent. Why come we just can't want to win? Why come that can't be enough? Why come it just can't be his team is trying to play to win, just like your team's trying to play to win? Why do you have to demonize the other side? Pull every racial card imaginable. And look, guys, I hate saying that shit. Believe me, I do. Because I do believe racism is a problem in America, but not when it's used like this. This is bullshit. This, what she's doing, is garbage. This makes any real claims sound like garbage. She hurts us. When we get black people to do this type of shit, this is not good, Johnson. Trump is not telling people to be violent. If I found that Trump was doing that, I'd definitely be the first to say it. I need her. Joy Reid should have to produce receipts. Produce receipts. Don't say I think. Don't say maybe. Stand on it, Joy. If what you're saying is Trump isn't just trying to win an election, he's trying to get his people to be violent if he loses the election. Produce evidence. Really. You shouldn't be able to just say that and everything be okay. You go back to your expensive ass crib.
When he lost the last time, how much easier would it be to get the Republican House Speaker or John Roberts and the right-wing Supreme Court conservatives to throw the election to Trump? These are the things we need to consider.
Now, what we need to consider, Joy, is the fact. And that fact is when somebody's guilty, they're always convinced that the other side is as guilty as they. Yeah, it's a narcissistic trait in some people. Yeah, if you're a bad person, you assume other people are bad. But not everyone is as bad as you. You know what I'm saying? I'm not saying that Trump's a saint. I'm not saying that at all. But what I'm saying is you are accusing the Republican Party of doing things that the Democratic Party has been not only doing, but they probably invented this shit. And you're accusing Elon Musk of doing things with Twitter that were already being done in Twitter just the other way. And I don't remember you complaining at all, but it was just the other way. In fact, I think that's why Elon brought Twitter, because of what you guys were doing with Twitter. And you didn't have a problem with it. And he saw a way to make money too. I don't think it's been profitable yet, but that's because you guys own the media. So you owning the media puts pressure on advertisers not to spend money with X. But see, that's sort of my whole point. As bad as you say Trump is, and all the stuff you're saying Trump is manipulating, when you bring the media into this, I know you're full of shit. Because I know the majority of the media moves that are made, the media industrial complex is run by the Democratic Party, by and large. That's who runs this shit. Everybody knows it. Every actor in Hollywood knows it. Every person in news media knows it. We all know it. Even independent media people know that shit. We're not even signed with big dogs, and we know that. And you get up on your television, you get up on your show, you use the MSDNC. Who owns this? Walt Disney or some shit? You get up here and you pretend that it's the other people that are doing the manipulating. And once again, I'm not saying that the Republican Party doesn't manipulate. I'm not saying they don't try to get the narrative going their way. But what I'm saying is, you own the cable media. It's owned by these people. The Democratic Party was able to stand up a disliked person with no national profile that a week before she became the nominee was told she was the worst decision that Joe Biden ever made. Democrats said that. And now, a week later, yay, Kamala, we need a Mamala. Give me a break, Johnson. How does that become a thing if not by manipulating the media?
It's time to get into a little bit of voter registration info, ladies and gentlemen. Now, at the beginning of Kamala Harris's campaign, again, I told you guys that was more the honeymoon period, but she was surging, right? Like they said, oh, look, she's leading in all these swing states, etc. Then after the endorsement from Taylor Swift, there was an increase in Democrat voter registration. In fact, significantly in Pennsylvania, which is, for those who don't know, Pennsylvania is Taylor Swift's home state. That's where she's originally from. Got to remember, people move to Nashville a lot of times. But that was kind of a sign, right? That looked like things were going to be great for Kamala Harris and the Democratic Party. Now, as we get closer to Election Day, things are starting to change. And it's really interesting how the tide is starting to turn. And I think one of the things I want to remind people when we get into Republican voters, it seems like to me that whereas Democrat voters may tend to act a little bit earlier, it seems like conservative voters tend to wait a little bit later. And I think you're going to see that now in this clip here from CNN about the new voter registration. Listen to this, folks.
Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, well, they might as well just assume residency in this Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. It's attracted the most amount of attention of any of the 50 states, and it could very well determine the next president. Now, with the voter registration deadline fast approaching, there are some critical data points to help give us some clues about what might happen in just 3 short weeks. So I have Harry Enton here at the Magic Wall to dive into the numbers. All right, so Harry, tell us what you have found about how voters are leaning at this point compared to 2020.
Yeah, I mean, the voter registration numbers, if you want a stat that Republicans absolutely love, it's this one. All right. Pennsylvania voter registration. You register by party in that state. You go back to November of 2020. You see Democrats 47%, Republicans 39%. That was an 8-point advantage. Look at where we are today. Yes, more voters in Pennsylvania are registered as Democrats and Republicans, but it's now just 44% to 40%. Now that you got a 4-point gap, Republicans, have cut that Democratic advantage in half. In such a short period of time. They have gone out, they have registered voters. There are folks that have come over to their side who were previously registered Democrats. The question is, where are they picking up ground, Manu? Where are they?
Pause here for just a second and let's talk about something. So you guys see what's happening, right? It looks as though the Republican voters waited, whereas a lot of the Democrat voters, or those who were considering supporting the Democratic Party, waiting to see if Biden was going to drop out or whatever, the moment that Kamala Harris was announced, they were like, okay, I'm going to go ahead and register, Democrat, especially after that endorsement from Taylor Swift as well. But now you're starting to see with the conservative voters, it seems like, again, they tend to wait a little bit later. We are now about 3 weeks away from the presidential election. And now they're starting to see an increase in GOP registration. So we got to ask again, where are those voters coming from? Because I would think a lot of people that were like Trump supporters, they probably already were registered anyway, right? Like these are people that were probably already registered to vote, maybe supported Trump in 2016 and in 2020. But these are people that most likely probably were not registered in 2022 for the midterms and also in 2020. So who could those people be? One possibility is it could be some of those Nikki Haley voters, people who supported her during the GOP primary, but maybe they weren't registered through the Republican Party. It could be them. It could be some independents. And I think that's going to be something that really decides this presidential race. It's going to be the independent voters, right? Let's go ahead and dive back in.
Picking up ground. This to me says it all. All right. Which Pennsylvania counties did the GOP gain in registration? If you look in counties where less than 50% of the population is non-college white voters, Republicans gain just a point. Where you have over 50% non-college whites, look at this. Republicans gain 6 points on average.
Wow.
They are picking up ground in the areas you would expect them to pick up ground.
So once again, we're seeing that Republicans are picking up, again, the non-college white voters. This also speaks to, some of the blue collar workers as well, tend to be leaning more towards the Republican Party.
Right, those non-college white dominated areas, coal country in the Northeast, Southwest outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. But the bottom line is the registration trends, the trends we've been seeing the last few cycles with Republicans dominating among non-college white voters, very much showing up in this party registration.
It's so interesting because David McCormick, who's the Senate candidate, the Republican Senate candidate, told me actually he believes that can actually propel him to victory because they're narrowing that margin with Democrats of voter registration. What does this mean for Kamala Harris and her chances of victory in Pennsylvania?
All right, so all of this data, bad news for Democrats, right? Good news for Republicans. But there's one thing to keep in mind, right? You had that New York Times Siena College poll that came out yesterday that showed Kamala Harris slightly ahead, but within the margin of error. Why is that? Because take a look here. This is the Pennsylvania margin by party registration in that poll. What you see here is that Kamala Harris, I'm going to come over to your side of the screen, Manu, is doing better among Democrats, a 77-point lead, than Donald Trump is among Republicans, a 74-point advantage. He's also doing better with those who are not registered with a party or with another party. But this nugget is key because even though Republicans have closed that registration gap, they haven't closed it completely. So the fact that Harris is doing slightly better among Democrats and Republicans, and there are more of them, that is what gives Democrats solace, is because at this particular point, that state, compared to, say, Arizona, slightly more favorable to Kamala Harris.
So I want to jump in here for just a second, and I want to say something as well. So what I think is happening is I think some of the people that are coming out to support Kamala Harris, and by the way, some people have already voted. I've already noticed this. But some of the people that are coming out to support Kamala Harris, they're probably from that Philadelphia and Pittsburgh area, right? So those areas tend to be more blue. It's similar like this in Massachusetts too. Like the cities tend to be more blue, and as you get out into the rural areas, they tend to be a little bit more red. With the exception of the Berkshires, they usually do tend to be blue. But I'm guessing that some of the people where the Republican Party may be closing that gap is with some of those rural voters that maybe did not come out and vote for Donald Trump in 2020. So maybe it's those people. I'm wondering if some of those people that they're gaining are people that may have supported Joe Biden in 2020, but now are supporting Donald Trump. Remember what they're saying in the story here. And this is what we always got to remember. What is the message in the story? Is that Republican voter registration is increasing, particularly in Pennsylvania. They are starting to close that gap between the Democratic Party. So that would tell me these are either independent voters that maybe are registering Republican, or it could be people, and Democratic Party may not want to hear this, but it could be some of the people that voted for Biden in 2020 and now are flipping to vote for Donald Trump. And I've seen this happen before. Remember, there were people that voted for Obama that switched and voted for Donald Trump. There were people that voted for Trump in 2016 and voted for Biden in 2020. In fact, I know one person personally who did that. So we're having like a lot of like movement that's happening, particularly there in Pennsylvania. But he's going to get into some of the other states, too, that I want you to see.
At least in the polling data so far.
So what does this tell us? I mean, are we seeing this nationally? Are we seeing this in other battleground states, this change in the registration advantage Democrats?
Yeah, all right. So this, if it was just Pennsylvania and we're seeing just one state, I don't think we'd necessarily be doing this segment, but I believe it is part of a larger picture. Fewer voters who are registered as Democrats. This is across the battleground states where you have party registration. Not every state has party registration, right? Wisconsin doesn't, Georgia doesn't, Michigan doesn't. But in the battleground states where, in fact, you do have party registration, there are now fewer registered Democrats in Arizona, fewer registered Democrats in Nevada, fewer registered Democrats, and, of course, the great state of North Carolina.
Okay, that could be a problem for Kamala Harris's campaign. This is the exact opposite of what we were seeing when Kamala Harris announced. This is the opposite. You know, she was doing pretty well in those states. And now we're starting to see that voter registration for the Democratic Party is down in those swing states. I'll tell you something else in a minute. We'll come back. We'll come back.
So what we're seeing in Pennsylvania is being seen in other states as well. More folks are registering as Republicans as compared to Democrats. But we're looking at the battleground states. Let's take this out nationally, all right? This is party registration, but let's look at party identification. Party registration, of course, is you're actually registered with the party. Party ID is when you say, I feel like a Democrat today, I feel like a Republican today. They're correlated, but they're not exactly the same. But I think it gets at the trend that's going on here, Manu. All right, so party ID nationally. You go to October, November of 2016, Democrats had a 3-point advantage. You go 4 years ago, Democrats had a 6-point advantage. Look at where we are today, Manu. Republicans with a 1-point advantage. A very different picture, very much mirroring what we see in the party registration numbers in those key battleground states and Pennsylvania in particular.
This is very telling, you guys. This is very telling. Again, as I've said before, and I don't know how you guys feel about this, but it does seem like to me that Democrats tend to, when it comes to presidential election, it seems like Democrat voters tend to act early and Republican voters tend to act a little bit later. And so this is why I was saying, like, when Kamala Harris was having like her honeymoon period, this is why I was telling people, like, you guys, like, you should probably wait until we get closer to the election, because that happens for a lot of candidates. Like, they announce and then like they have this wave of like energy and everybody's hype and excited about them. And then as we get closer to the election day, you see things start to change. Now, I want to show you something else that I think people should see. This is important as well. Shout out to Simon Ataba for this clip. NBC's Murray says Harris is losing a 5-point lead, Listen to this. Now, this is MSNBC, so 2 different networks.
We had, of course, Joe Biden in the race, a losing ground to Donald Trump. Kamala Harris gets in the race. It seems to be tied up. You have a debate. Harris gets the bump from the debate, goes up 4 or 5 points, and then it comes back where you knew it was going to come back to. We're 3 weeks out. We're tied. It's 48-48. And there's some really interesting numbers I want to ask you about, and mainly about Kamala Harris needing to lock down a higher percentage of Hispanic voters, needing to lock down a higher number of Black voters, and also, of course, carrying on the other side of the margin, carrying a historic number of white educated voters. And it's just fascinating to see how all that's going to play together. Tell us what you got.
Yeah, and Joe, you're exactly right. The timing of our poll is really instructive here. And when our September poll came out and had Harris with a 5-point lead over Donald Trump, that, of course, was after the debate. It was after a really rough news environment for Donald Trump with the discussion about Springfield, Ohio. And now all of a sudden we do show a tied race. And what has occurred is that those soft Republicans, non-MAGA Republicans, have come back home to Trump.
Okay. So do you see what's happening, ladies and gentlemen? So he said the soft MAGA, he said the soft MAGA Republicans have come back home to Donald Trump. Kamala Harris was ahead 5 points, by 5 points ahead of Donald Trump. And now he's saying that it is tied. So that means that some of those, I would say some of maybe the Nikki Haley supporters in the Republican primary, or maybe even some of those Ron DeSantis supporters, I'm not really sure, but it seems like it might be more the Nikki Haley people are starting to come back around and say, okay, you know what, I'm just going to go ahead. I wanted Nikki Haley or I wanted, Ron DeSantis, but I think, instead of sitting this one out, I think I'm going to go ahead and support Donald Trump. So what that shows you is that it seems like with the Republican Party, in particular with the Republican voters, they seem to come back around in the end. Now, there may be some of them still, and nobody is really mentioning this anymore, but the reality is RFK Jr. is still on the ballot in some of those swing states, by the way. And there are still some people that are going to vote for RFK Jr., even though he, you know, sort of suspended his campaign and got on board with Donald Trump and said, you know, we're trying to do this, yada, yada. But this is another thing. And I think this is where the Democratic Party could be underestimating, because there's a lot of focus on Jill Stein, et cetera. But I think they could be underestimating the fact that there were some people who may have been maybe open, you know, to the Democratic Party or were Democrats or whatever, that are supporting RFK Jr. All of RFK Jr.'s support didn't come from Donald Trump. I would say most of it was, but not all of it. So just keep that in mind. He is still on the ballot in the swing states. Go ahead and finish up here.
In our September poll, they were lagging, obviously, after the debate, after the discussion of Springfield, Ohio. Our poll finds them that they are back with Trump, and that explains him going from 44% in our poll in September now to 48%. But, Joe, you ended up mentioning the things that Harris has to work on with shoring up Latino voters, getting African Americans in the fold, white women. Our poll ends up having a really big gender gap, where Harris has a 14-point lead among female voters, while Donald Trump has a 16-point lead among male voters. That's overall a 30-point net gender gap. And what is kind of fascinating is that Trump's lead with men is slightly larger than Harris's lead with women. And if her ability to get back in a lead, national lead over Trump, is being able to have a bigger lead among women than Trump's lead among men. And so a lot of those demographics, this is the last 3 weeks of the race. This is why you end up having mobilization and campaign, to be able to juice your turnout, to shore up your weaknesses. And we're going to see what both campaigns have up their sleeves over the next 3 weeks.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen. So yeah, this explains also why Kamala Harris's campaign may be freaking out a little bit, or why the Democratic Party may be freaking out a little bit. Obviously, there is they call it the threat of Jill Stein. So obviously they are going to be worried about that. But at the same time, the reality is the fact that she has lost that 5-point lead, that is very telling. And I remember a couple of weeks ago, there were some commentators, corporate media commentators, that said that, you know, it didn't look like that needle was going to move at all. I think they spoke too soon. Things change.
Officially reveals his victory plan against Russia, and it is as delusional as you expect it to be. Ukraine's victory plan, in a nutshell, is to start World War III and nuclear war. The first point is an immediate non-starter for many Western countries who've been supportive of Ukraine. Zelensky claims in order to defeat Russia, the first step is to admit Ukraine into NATO, which would trigger Article 5 and start World War III. Zelensky says this, knowing that the West doesn't even want his ass in NATO. The West said to Zelensky that they may accept him into NATO after he defeats Russia, which is essentially the West saying, nah, it's not going to happen. So let's get this straight. In order to join NATO, the alliance said that Ukraine has to defeat Russia first. But according to Zelensky's victory plan, the first bullet point is for Ukraine to join NATO. Clearly, Zelensky is confused here. Apparently, Zelensky don't understand that the West was just using him in his country to weaken Russia. Apparently, Zelensky didn't know that the West was using Ukraine in order to test battlefield innovations of the military-industrial complex. Apparently, Zelensky didn't know that the goal of the West is not successful war, it's never-ending profitable war, and the Ukraine war was extremely profitable for the military-industrial complex. The only victory plan for Ukraine is negotiating for peace and learning how to cooperate with their neighbors.
Russian targets inside. What's up, guys? D7 here. We'll talk a little bit about this warning that Russia's putting out to not only Israel, but to the West altogether. They're warning them not to hit or strike the nuclear facilities inside of Iran. Now, this is Russia's warning to Israel. Russia's been battling Ukraine. Israel's had its situations going on, but then Israel jumped up and hit Russian targets inside of a Syrian port. This kind of drug them into the conflict toward each other. And it's obvious they're on one side, Israel's on one side with the West, and Russia's on the other. So Russia warning them that if they want to target nuclear facilities, this can get catastrophic really quick. Netanyahu came out just the other day and said, we're not going to target the oil or nuclear facilities. It was just a short time afterwards, we'd witnessed a massive explosion at an oil refinery within Iran. Haven't found out exactly what was responsible for that, but kind of ironic. It happens right after he says, we're not going to hit it. So we just sent THAADs there. So a lot of things are happening on this front in terms of World War III popping off at any minute. The teams are like picked. Everyone's on their sides. And you've actually got Iran launching missiles into Israel, hitting Israel inside of Israel, and it's wearing down their Iron Dome. This is why they sent the THAAD in, but the THAAD can only be operated by American soldiers. Russia knows this. Certain weapons can only be fired by those that have been trained to use them. And this puts our troops in the line of fire. We also just sent out the B-2 bomber. This thing hasn't been used in the war front in a while. They said that they just hit 5 different Houthi areas really hard with this. Deep underground bunker busters. There's only one aircraft in the world that can drop their biggest one, like the GBU, and it is that stealth bomber. It's active. It's in the region, and it comes from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri, here in the United States. That's right. I'm telling you, we're an open target. Nothing's happened yet. But if they want to stop these B-52s or these bombers from bombing them and not seeing them coming, they would strike the air base that houses them, that is in Missouri. Okay? So you don't just get these bombers out for nothing. I think it's a warning to Iran, something big's coming, and if they were going to hit a nuclear facility in the region, it would be this bomb, this aircraft that they've got on the prowl. Man, things definitely on the cusp of just going to a whole new level. Israel saying that they're going to respond, and they're going to do so by Election Day in the United States, man. The world is a stage. Get ready for it, guys. Join me on.
Hi, everyone. Judge Andrew Napolitano here for Judging Freedom. Today is Thursday, October 17th, 2024. Pepe Escobar joins us now from Moscow, where it's midnight. Pepe, welcome, my dear friend, as always. You're so gracious to stay up late. I don't know if you stay up late every night, but you're gracious to stay up late for us.
We have to.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. A lot to talk about: Ukraine, Iran, the Kremlin, and Tehran, the killing of Sinwar and BRICS. But let me start with Ukraine. Is there any truth from your understanding and your sources and your observation of Russian media, to the allegations that the North Koreans have sent troops to Russia to fight against the Ukrainians, and that some of those North Korean troops have defected to the West?
No.
Okay. I mean, it would be humiliating to President Putin,
of course,
with the size of his population and with young men volunteering to the military, for him to have to call on North Korea to send troops there. But this is what is this? A PR stunt concocted by Kyiv?
Russia doesn't need anybody. They have more than enough. They don't need a new mobilization, and they have enough reserves. If they need in the front line, they have enough reserve troops. And if that would ever happen, it would be a humiliation for the DPRK as well. They don't do this anywhere. Of course not. One thing is the DPRK sending missiles to Russia. That's one thing. Another thing is to send troops, and on top of it, potential defectors. Troops in North Korea, they are not potential defectors. They are heavily screened. This is another childish.
Well, if North Korea sends missiles, will it send troops or technicians to operate those missiles?
They don't need it. The Russians go there, they learn, and they come back.
Got it.
Russians are very good at it, you know.
Okay. What is the status of the Ukraine incursion into Kursk?
Oh, apparently they lost over 20,000 killed in action and growing every day. So, and of course, this disappeared a little bit from the map because this is already BRICS week here in Moscow. So nobody's talking about Kursk. And next week, even more. After BRICS, these two BRICS weeks, then it's another story. But they consider the Kursk matter as going to be, the mopping up operation is proceeding, and it's going to last another few weeks or so. So nobody's even paying attention to it, Judge. Really.
Do we know if Americans have been killed for fighting in Kursk?
I cannot tell you because I haven't checked these past few days. I have to be frank with you.
Okay.
I have been consumed by BRICS since last Friday, in fact.
Give me your best gut feeling from all you know and all your sources and all of the geopolitics going on. How much longer you think Ukraine can hold out? We know they're going to hold out at least until November 5th, but let's not be cynical about the U.S. election. They're being slaughtered. How much longer can they hold out?
They could hold out until next spring. But the thing is, I think the question is how much further the Russians want to go. And there's no definitive answer, obviously, from the MOD and from the Russian Security Council. And considering what sort of Minsk II, Minsk III style shenanigans the West is going to come up with in the next few months after the result of the US presidential elections.
We understand that the Ukrainian losses are in excess of 600,000 dead. What are the Russian losses? Do we know?
It's 8-1, Judge, roughly. And our good friend Andrei Martyanov, he is calculating between 7 and 8-1. And we don't have definitive numbers. There were a few numbers a few weeks ago that were completely absurd, saying that Russian killing in action was over 100,000. No, definitely not. They are probably around, let's say, between 60 and 70,000 max.
Okay. Transitioning to Israel, what is the current relationship or your current thinking about the relationship between Moscow and Tehran?
Extremely important because of two events that are going to take place in next week and probably the week after next or a few days after that. Iran is going to be a full member of the BRICS summit next week. So they will be at the top of the table discussing with BRICS partners and with what we call BRICS Plus or BRICS Outreach, the partners and the people who are invited for the summit, including heads of state such as Erdogan from Turkey. And after that, there will be the formal signature of the Comprehensive Strategic Partnership between Russia and Iran, a process that has been going on for 2 years. And Putin and Pezeshkian especially will sign the Comprehensive Strategic Partnership, which is geoeconomic, geopolitical, and very important, military as well. Military has been going on since last year. All sorts of exchanges. So depending on what sort of apocalyptic adventure we have in West Asia, post-Israeli attack against Iran and then the Iranian retribution, we could have pitted frontally the US and Israel on one side and Iran and Russia on the other side. And then all bets are off.
Our friend and colleague and regular contributor here, Dr. Gilbert Doctorow, senses, in his view, a hesitation on the part of President Putin to sign that agreement and a expectation for some restraint on the part of the Iranians, forgive me, as a condition of signing it. Do you agree with Professor Doctorow, or is this going to be signed as agreed to?
Well, we're not having any signs that there will be any procrastination from the Russian side. There was the possibility that the agreement could be signed during the BRICS summit, but that would dilute the importance of the agreement. The date has not been set in stone, but what's set in stone that they're going to sign it before the end of this year. Most probably end of October, maximum beginning of November. And considering that they are discussing closely the situation in West Asia at foreign ministry level, at defense ministry level, and the meetings between Putin and Pezeshkian. So it will happen. We don't know the exact date. And it suits them both, because then this will create another layer of pan-Eurasian integration linked to BRICS, linked to the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and linked to the fact that both Iran and Russia see these declinations of the forever wars as wars against them. In the case of Ukraine against Russia, in the case of West Asia against Iran.
If Israel attacks Iran and Iran attacks Israel and it gets accelerated, and the Americans think that Israel has its back to the wall, and the Americans enter the war by firing offensive missiles from jets and ships into Iran, what will President Putin do?
Nobody knows. Nobody knows. Depends if the deal would have been signed by that
But
time.
if the deal has been signed, what will he be obliged to do in order to comply with the deal and not lose face internationally?
Of course, there will be substantial extra Russian help, which will go beyond what we already have on the ground. For instance, the S-400 missiles. Defense missiles. They are already in Iran. So we can go further than that. Could be Russian hypersonics, for instance. Iranians, don't forget that Persian tradition, 2,500 years at least. They're very, very proud. And IRGC generals are saying on the record, look, we don't need, we have everything we need, and we even have secret weapons that nobody knows about. Nobody knows what kind of secret weapons are these, So the IRGC may not even request Russian help. But it all depends on how this apocalyptic dementia will evolve. And we are all hostages of this completely demented spiral, in fact, which was provoked by the Israelis in the first place.
Back to BRICS. Will Turkey join this week?
No, Turkey, very important, Judge. And this is a very complex story. I'll try to be brief. Today, I received a report of one of my good sources in Istanbul, where I was last week, in fact, and saying that basically Erdogan will use going to Kazan next week and having 3 very important bilaterals with Putin, Xi, and Modi individually, plus
Putin who and Modi?
Putin, Xi Jinping, and Modi. He's going to meet the 3 top BRICS individually, bilaterally. This is in itself, it's already huge. We can interpret it as Erdogan selling Turkey to BRICS. That's what it is. But, and that a very important but, these good sources in Istanbul say that he's going to use this as leverage to extract more concessions from, guess what, the Americans. First of all, because Turkey is broke. And the number one responsible actor for practically throwing Turkey into bankruptcy is Erdogan himself. So he needs funds. He needs investments. It's not going to come from Saudi Arabia or the Emirates. Not enough. So he'll try to use this, saying, look, NATO, okay, I'll continue in NATO, but I'll become a full member of BRICS and SCO as well. What do you have to offer me? It makes sense considering the way he plays, Judge. So it was very sobering to receive this report earlier today, in fact. And considering what the discussions that we have in Istanbul last week with Kemalists, secular Kemalists, people who are not affiliated to Erdogan's party or a sort of Islamic opposition. No, very clear-minded Kemalist secularists. They say, no, it's another one of his power plays. Makes sense.
But
very interesting to see what Putin, Xi, and Modi are going to tell Turkey. What do they expect from Erdogan?
Well, he's going to have to leave NATO. He can't be in BRICS and NATO at the same time.
On those, you're right. You're absolutely right. So let's. The thing is, he doesn't have a strategic vision of this very complex process of Eurasia integration, where BRICS and SCO, Eurasia Economic Union, all these organizations are together. And Turkey is not a member of any of them. They are an observer at the SCO. The only thing that Erdogan and the people around him, real estate speculators, what we call the Gang of Five in Istanbul, the 5 major real estate conglomerates that support him. They want more trade and commerce with large parts of Eurasia, especially Central Asia. That's what it's all about, essentially. So he's not seeing Eurasia integration as a process of trying to come up with an alternative geoeconomical and geopolitical system of international relations and financial markets as well. He doesn't see it that way, especially because, and this is something, whenever they tell me, I fall on the floor. He doesn't read anything. He doesn't discuss it with anything. He doesn't have intellectual debate with anybody. He imposes what he wants. So it's a very narrow-minded view of the world.
I want to ask you about President Xi. What is the Chinese view, the Chinese government view of the Israeli slaughters in Gaza and attacks on Lebanese civilians?
Condemn it, sternly, and sternly from the Chinese point of view, which they are always very diplomatic, reticent, and they measure their language. But this has gone over the top, even for them, and even for those the briefings by the Minister of Foreign Relations in Beijing. So they are more or less aligned, not as forcefully as Russia in the UN Security Council, for instance, when Nebenzia, the Russian representative at the UN, now he's, He's unplugged now. You can feel his anger. The Chinese are profoundly disturbed because they know that in terms of West Asia as a whole, as one of their corridors, commercial corridors for the New Silk Road projects, the whole thing could go down the drain, just like that, if this war becomes a regional war. So obviously they condemn it. But the hard work and, let's say, the forefront of the condemnation is Russia. And considering that the strategic partnership is so close, and for instance, earlier this week, they were together at the SCO summit in Islamabad in Pakistan. They were also discussing all that. This was a sort of mini SCO summit. Now, the big summit was in July with the heads of state. This one was the heads of government, special representatives, etc. They were discussing connectivity corridors. They were discussing, Trans-Mongolia, Trans-Siberian, the connectivity corridor, the China-Pakistan economic corridor. And they were discussing, of course, West Asia as well.
I want to ask you some questions about Europe, but before we do, I'm going to play a clip from the Spanish Parliament in which a member of the Prime Minister's own party, Pedro Sanchez, had some very strong words to his face. Chris, cut number 13.
How does this differ from Nazi gas chambers? I address you all, ladies and gentlemen, including the president. No difference. As a nation, we are complicit in perpetrating this genocide. You travel globally discussing an arms embargo that your government cannot enforce. Your government has been selling arms since after October 7th. It has bought €1 billion worth of weapons. €1 billion. Ladies and gentlemen, during this year of genocide, have allowed weapons to be transported through from our ports throughout this year. If you truly support the arms embargo, Mr. Sanchez, cease deceit and enact it immediately.
Do you think there's any chance that, A, there's a crack in the "we will follow Biden" mantra of the European countries, and B, the European countries will do anything? Prime Minister or President Macron is furious. We'll play another clip in a minute of Prime Minister Starmer agreeing with one of his critics that the British government needs to do something to stop the slaughter. Where do you think this is going in the European minds?
There's already an enormous split, and including pan-European public opinion. There's no question about that. But the problem is, once again, Judge, they are vassals. They are subordinated to everything that comes from Washington. They don't have real sovereignty. If they did, they would have been doing something about the genocide, and they can't. It's very, very sad for all of us who grew up with European culture and all that. But they have.
All right. Well, then let me play you Ed Davey, who's the leader of the Liberal Democrats, supposedly to the left of Labor, theoretically. Our friend George Galloway could explain that for us. But I want to play you what he says on the floor of Parliament and Prime Minister Starmer's agreement with him. And you tell me if this is worth believing. Cut number 10.
Israeli Finance Minister Smotrich had said that starving 2 million people in Gaza might be justified and moral. National Security Minister Ben-Gvir called settlers who killed a 19-year-old on the West Bank heroes. After my visit to Israel and Palestine last February, having witnessed the damage that these extremist ministers in the Netanyahu government are doing, I called on the last government to sanction them. The last government refused, but we now learn that the former Foreign Secretary was considering this. So will the Prime Minister now sanction the ministers Ben-Gvir and Smotrich?
We are looking at that because they're obviously abhorrent comments, as he rightly says, along with other really concerning activity in the West Bank, but also across the region. The humanitarian situation in Gaza is dire. The death toll has surpassed 42,000, and access to basic services is becoming much harder. And Israel must take all possible steps to avoid civilian casualties, to allow aid into Gaza in much greater volume, and provide the UN and humanitarian partners the ability to operate effectively. Mr. Speaker, along with France, the UK will convene an urgent meeting of the UN Security Council to address them.
And that this urgent meeting of the UN Security Council, the U.S. will veto whatever purports to restrain Israel. And even if it didn't veto it, Israeli forces will shoot at UN troops in Lebanon.
Of course, they are shooting at UNIFIL on an everyday basis, and nothing happens. Condemned by half of Europe, and nothing happens. And well, on Starmer is very complicated, Judge. Starmer
Is he credible?
No, he's a Zionist. This is rhetoric. It sounds wonderful when you hear that in the British Parliament, but there's no follow-up.
Who or what can stop the slaughter by the IDF forces?
A phone call from the White House, which you know will never happen. Really, it boils down to this. Really, we know will never happen. It's not a phone call from the pen. It's not a phone call from Lloyd Austin or from ghastly little Blinky. It's from the White House, and we know it's not going to happen, unfortunately.
And it probably won't happen no matter who wins the American presidency, because on Israel, they would each try to outdo Joe Biden.
Exactly. Once again, unfortunately. And the thing is, Russia and China, they see that clearly. Iran as well. So these three BRICS, they see this clearly, and they said, there's nothing we can do really in practical terms, apart from helping West Asia as a whole. And this means helping the axis of resistance. So China in the background, Russia, let's say, in the middle position, and Iran in the forefront, their strategy is to help the axis of resistance as much as they can. They're going to have a special session on Palestine, which is practically certain to happen next week in Kazan. Mahmoud Abbas was invited, so the BRICS members, the full members, and the BRICS partners, BRICS Outreach, BRICS Plus, they'll be sitting together and discussing exclusively Palestine. We hope that something more practical would come out of it, because BRICS' reputation is now, involved in that. They need a forceful BRICS declaration on the genocide in Gaza, because the global South, the global majority, is actually expecting that from them.
My dear friend, thank you very much. Thank you for staying up until the wee hours, and thank you for your analysis, as always.
Pity we couldn't get into BRICS, but next week I'll be in Kazan, so we have to organize how to do it.
Well, we'll do it. I'm sure you have sources that'll be at the BRICS gathering, and we'll be all ears. Is the Russian army continuing its march westward? Is the Ukrainian military continuing to lose? And what is going on, as we understand it, with that catastrophic incursion into Kursk?
Well, let's start from the bottom and work up. The Kursk incursion is largely at an end. Most of the people that went into Russia, and some of them, unfortunately, included Americans in Ukrainian uniform, along with some Poles. There may have also been some Brits involved. They're virtually all dead. And there's not much left to it at this stage of the game. The Russians are in the business of cleanup, not only in Kursk, but up and down the line of contact. And again, as we've said so often in the past, President Putin has made it clear that he does not want to rule Ukrainians. So we've now moved beyond the traditionally Russian areas where you have Russian speakers into areas that were historically Ukrainian. He's not very excited about that. He would rather not do that. But he's going to press slowly but surely further and further towards the Dnieper River, because he knows that in Europe, the appetite for this whole thing is gone. Regardless of what Scholz has said or has done recently, the Germans aren't sending any more material help to the Ukrainians. They regard this as a lost war. Macron certainly understands that. I think that's widely understood in Europe. The problem is that they're waiting for Washington to stand up and acknowledge reality. Nobody in Washington right now is ready to do that. And that's one of the reasons that I think President Trump's strength is growing, because people, not just here in the United States, but around the world, want an end to this thing. They recognize how potentially dangerous it is. And so as a result, I think they're waiting for President Trump to arrive on the scene, assuming that he wins the election.
Colonel, I don't want to go too deeply down a rabbit hole, but you did mention something in the answer you just gave that I have to ask you about. Americans in Ukrainian uniforms? How common is that? How lawful is that?
Oh, well, look, if we're going to start worrying about the law, that's being broken, as you know, Judge, so many times. We treat international law with complete contempt. And then we excoriate anybody who does something we don't like as violating the so-called rules-based order, which really means challenges our military and financial hegemony in the world. We've had Americans on the ground in Ukraine doing all sorts of things in and out of uniform for a very long time. We know that other NATO members had people involved with this Kursk operation. At one point, it was described as the baby of the SACEUR, the Supreme Commander Europe. And they said it's the Cavoli plan. I don't know whether or not that was true, but that's what was kicked around at very high levels. So we've all been involved in this thing. And at some point when this tragedy ends, we're going to discover just how many people were actually killed who were from NATO countries and from the United States. But right now, all we can do is speculate, because those facts just aren't available to us.
The Guardian of London is reporting this morning, this seems bizarre, but I have to ask you about it, that there are North Korean troops on the ground with the Russians. Is that credible?
I don't think so. What I think you might see, certainly not combat troops under any circumstances, but you might see some North Koreans that have been involved in fortifications or defensive measures along the line of contact, but not in combat. I would just rule that out completely. The Russians don't need the help. Part of the reason people mention these things is to convey the utterly false perception that Russia is in trouble, that Russia doesn't have enough men or doesn't have enough troops. It's all nonsense. The Russians can't take all the volunteers that want to fight. Just stop and consider that for a minute.
Transitioning over to Israel and the Middle East, Colonel, is there significance to the deaths last weekend of 4 IDF special forces? They were all 19 years old, and the injury of 70 plus IDF soldiers while they were having dinner in a protected military base deep inside of Israel.
Well, certainly whenever the Hezbollah has struck targets, it's tried to hit military targets. And it is alarming to the Israelis that something could get through what they consider to be their air and missile defense system. And the fact that they killed these young men strikes at home. Everyone in Israel, whenever someone is killed, everyone in Israel feels the pain. and the fact that so many were wounded is very frightening. I don't know if you noticed it, but a few weeks ago, we watched Mr. Netanyahu deliver a speech in the aftermath of the Iranian counterstrike, where they fired 180 missiles and basically gave a demonstration of precision strike, their ability to hit targets. And they only killed one or two people, and that was by design. They weren't interested in killing large numbers of people. They were trying to signal that we had the capability to penetrate your air defenses. Now, the reason I'm bringing that up is that his hands were literally shaking as he read his remarks.
Right.
I think there is real fear and concern at the top of the Israeli leadership right now, because Hezbollah has control of not only information, but access to their airspace. They've been flying unmanned aircraft, we call them drones, for a long time. They know where virtually everything is. The Iranians certainly do. There are no secrets left, which means that no base inside Israel is really safe any longer. That's what's most frightening. And if you can attack an Israeli military concentration like that, what does that mean for the thousands and thousands of Israelis who want to go back to their homes in northern Israel? They're not going back anytime soon. That's pretty damn clear.
What do we know of Israel's plans to attack Iran?
Well, this is the
is this
$90 million question.
Is this guesswork at this point, Colonel?
No, well, it's not really guesswork. First of all, there are lists of all the things: power plants, water purification sites, as well as oil production facilities, is Iranian bases, particularly for the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. Remember, just as I pointed out that Hezbollah and Iran know pretty much where everything is in Israel, Israel knows where everything is in Iran. So this is the age of persistent surveillance. There is not much that you can do without being detected, especially if you have any sort of electronic or thermal signature. So there are a lot of places they can strike and do very serious harm. We have been preeminently concerned about the impact, obviously, on global markets of an attack on oil facilities, especially Karg Island. At the same time, we're also very concerned about any attempt to penetrate the mountain where, the Iranian nuclear facilities are located, because they're hundreds of feet beneath the surface. And most experts have concluded that the potential to penetrate hundreds of feet below the surface is not very good. You can go a certain distance, perhaps 100 feet, 200 feet, but much beyond that, it's very, very difficult. So there's a hope that that will not happen. And then finally, hovering in the background, you have this fear of an Iranian nuclear capability, that they could rapidly transform their existing stocks of enriched uranium or plutonium into warheads, which I think is probably real at this point. If you didn't want Iran to, quote unquote, get the bomb, then you shouldn't have done what you've been doing for years, which is threatening and bullying and pushing Iran. So I think that's also in the background. But the bottom line is this, and this is what people in the United States really need to understand. In the South, Hamas is alive. Has it been damaged? Of course. Is it being annihilated? No. In the North, you have Hezbollah. Has it been damaged? Of course. Is it annihilated? Absolutely not. So effectively, the Israeli Defense Force has failed in those two areas. They haven't been able to bring those areas under control. Right now, if you turn on Israeli television, officers are talking about, we may go a kilometer or two, or maybe 3 or 4 kilometers into southern Lebanon, but we're not going to drive to the Litani River as we have in the past. We can't do it. So you've got something of a stalemate, which from the standpoint of Hezbollah and Hamas is a victory. For the Israelis, it's tantamount to defeat. And in the midst of this, you have the prime minister who has now stated publicly he will attack whatever he thinks should be attacked in Iran, regardless of what we want or do not want. And you'll remember that over the weekend, there was a piece, I think it was in the Washington Post, I could be wrong. It might have been in the New York Times, where the journalist asserted that Mr. Netanyahu might conceivably be looking for an off-ramp. In other words, a willingness to step back from the maximalist objectives, and therefore the next Israeli strike on Iran would not be, everything that Israel has to offer. In fact, it would be scaled back. Well, since then, Prime Minister Netanyahu said, I don't know where this information came from, but that's absolutely false. And then, of course, we've had these leaks in the press where we've leaked deliberately, I guess, the discussions that we've had with the Iranians about asking them to exercise restraint. These things are completely damaging. So right now, I would say that both sides, Iran and Israel, have no interest in exercising much restraint. They may hold back behind the nuclear threshold, but everything else is fair game. And I think the Israelis will throw everything, including the kitchen sink, at Iran when the time comes. That's where we stand. And this is a last-ditch effort, Judge. Mr. Netanyahu doesn't have very many good cards to play. He's got thousands of American servicemen and women sitting on ships in the Red Sea, the Mediterranean, the Indian Ocean. We can't keep them there in perpetuity. The Navy is literally cannibalizing itself to continue to operate with some measure of effectiveness as it is. Our armed forces are not in particularly good shape. Our missile inventories are low. And remember, you got to go back into port in most cases to rearm. So when we get involved in anything, we have a fairly short burst of capability, go back and reload, and then return to the launch site at sea. These are things that Mr. Netanyahu knows. That's one of the reasons that the Terminal High Altitude Air Defense System was deployed to Israel. And people talk about the missiles, but the truth is that what is really important about the Terminal High Altitude Air Defense System is the radar. The radar is brilliant. It's probably unmatched anywhere in the world. It's one of the best things that we have ever produced. Now, what does that mean? It means that if you set that radar up in Washington, D.C. somewhere, and you point it towards the south, you can track a basketball at 500 feet above the ground in New Orleans. Think about that. That's the kind of resolution this radar provides. The reason I'm emphasizing that is that the missiles, we may exhaust the missiles that we've sent very quickly because you fire 2 or 3 missiles at every incoming target. But the radar is key because the radar can cue large numbers of systems all over Israel to focus on where the enemy is coming. And that's very, very important. So this radar is the crown jewel of what we have to offer right now in air and missile defense, and he's got it on the ground. The problem, of course, is the Iranians are aware of what I've just said, and it'll be a very lucrative target when the fighting begins.
You mentioned Netanyahu unloading everything but the kitchen sink. If it were to come the other way, if the Iranians were to unload everything but the kitchen sink, would Israel survive?
Israel is going to have a tough time. Let's be frank. I'm sure your other guests have told you similar things. The Iranians are capable of leveling large parts of Israel. There is no question about it. That's why it makes no sense from Mr. Netanyahu's standpoint to withhold anything from his attack on Iran, because he'll try to destroy as much as possible of Iran's capability to threaten and destroy him. It's only natural. I don't think he's going to be very successful, but we'll see. He has the advantage of our intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, space-based and otherwise, and I think that will help enormously. But will it be enough to prevent the arrival of large numbers of hypersonic missiles and ballistic missiles on target in Israel? And that I can't answer, but I think it's going to be very difficult for Israel, regardless of what they do.
You were speaking not too long ago about the U.S. Leaking information. I can imagine leaking the accurate contents of communications with the Iranians.
Revolutionary salute to our Queen Sanity for the donation to the war chest. Revolution is a way of life. Absolutely appreciate the love, Queen. Salute.
Going to terminate their communications with us, but among the leaks using their favorite place at which or to which to leak, the Washington Post, was this letter that supposedly was sent to Prime Minister Netanyahu that if he doesn't allow humanitarian aid into Gaza in 30 days, I don't know why 30 days, but 30 days, the United States will consider halting military supplies. 30 days and consider. It doesn't seem a very precise or threatening threat to me, but do you think it's realistic? Would the Biden administration ever say no to Netanyahu? Would they say, let food, water, medicine, and fuel in, or we'll stop sending you bullets, weapons, ammo, and spare parts?
The short answer is no. In fact, a good friend with a lot of years of experience inside the intelligence community said it very well to me. He said, when the time comes and Mr. Netanyahu wants something from the United States in the event of the next attack with Iran, he's not going to ask for anything. He will simply make demands, and we will meet those demands. I think we have to understand that this is very much a case of the tail wagging the dog. Here you have a nation of, at least when this began, of a little over 7 million Jewish Israelis, plus another million Arabs that are living inside Israel's borders. I mean, the current borders, not including Gaza and the West Bank.
Right.
And we are a nation of what? 330, 340 million. And we are now hostage to whatever Mr. Netanyahu decides to do. Those are the facts. He's in control. He's been in control from the very beginning. And while he has control, I think he's going to use it, because there is no guarantee after the November election that he'll be able to do then what he's doing now. I know that a lot of people are saying, well, you know, President Trump will give him whatever he wants. But if I were Mr. Netanyahu, I'm not sure that I would buy that argument. I think I would probably act now. And that's his best bet of dragging us into something. And again, if you look at this terminal high altitude air defense system and its radar, the roughly 100 American soldiers that are part of this, a lot of people are treating this as some sort of tripwire. Well, the truth is we've already got tripwires. We have those things in Iraq and Syria. And when President Trump was in office, he wanted to get our soldiers out of those places precisely because we could not defend them in the event of a high-end conventional conflict, which is what we're looking at with Iran and Israel. The terminal high-altitude air defense is not necessarily a tripwire, but it does signal that we will probably lose soldiers on the ground in Israel, on Israeli soil, if this fight continues. His hope that will be enough to trigger all-out war between the United States and Iran. But I'm not sure that would necessarily happen.
You told us a few minutes ago.
We should talk about that.
Well, you told us a few minutes ago about the deaths of American soldiers in Ukraine. It's not in the news anywhere. Their deaths have been totally hidden or covered up by the government. I would imagine the same thing would happen, even though if they died in Israel, even though the administration ostentatiously said, we have 100 on the ground now with the THAAD already in Israel. We announced it after it happened.
We have fought for almost 30 years now, very weak, incapable opponents. Those days are over. We now face not only Iran, but potentially Russia. There are thousands of Russian technical military personnel inside Iran. There are Russian pilots capable of flying aircraft in defense of Iran. People may have forgotten, but back during the Vietnam War and certainly during the Korean War, there were Russian pilots, in those days Soviet pilots, that flew aircraft, particularly in Korea, and were very effective. What I'm trying to say is that people in Washington, particularly in the administration and the White House, are afraid of being dragged into an all-out war. They don't want that. The problem is that right now they're hostage to Netanyahu. Netanyahu is going to do whatever he wants to do, and he wants to get us into the war. So if we were to lose these soldiers, there would be an attempt by the administration to strike back, but there would also be an attempt to rein in that strike. In other words, we don't want an all-out war with Iran that could bring us into confrontation with Russia. We've already lost the war in Ukraine, even though nobody talks about it. It's a blatant disaster. Over the weekend, I had several people who are over on the ground in Ukraine telling me that the numbers of deaths of Ukrainian soldiers far exceed 600,000. They've talked about 1.5 million casualties. Now, I don't know, but it's a disaster. Ukraine is in ruins. We've lost. Our equipment has failed. Everything we've done has failed. Do we want to relive this experience in the Middle East? I don't think anybody in the White House wants to. So I just think we want to avoid something that is now looking more and more inevitable, Judge.
Right. Let me take you back to Israel and ask for your thoughts, Colonel, on the alleged attack by IDF on UNIFIL. And before you respond, take a look at cut number 1.
At present, the conflict between Lebanon and Israel is intermittently escalating. Due to the ongoing combat, several camps of the United Nations Interim Force in Lebanon have suffered damage. Additionally, a portion of our peacekeeping comrades have been injured. We continue to make every effort to maintain peace and stability in the region.
Commander of Chinese troops fighting with UNIFIL attacked by the Israelis. My God, can this get any more complex or dangerous?
Well, I don't think they're fighting with UNIFIL. UNIFIL is not there to fight anybody, as we know. This is a
Well, it can shoot
peacekeeping.
back when it's shot at.
Of course. And by the way, the incidents that we've seen thus far involving Irish troops that happen to be part of that organization, the Irish soldiers have behaved with commendable restraint. And that's the point I was trying to get to
I guess
before.
that's because Ray McGovern was not their commander.
Yeah, probably. No, listen, you don't want hotheads running the show in CENTCOM. And we certainly don't want a war with Russia and Iran. That's the point. That's why let us assume that some American soldiers are killed. Do we instantly commit the entire United States, all 340 million people, our scientific industrial base and the armed forces to all-out war? I don't think so. And I think that I'm sure that the CENTCOM commander has received some very specific orders on that score. Professional soldiers, especially their officers, are expected to exercise restraint and control over their emotions. And however angry they may be, they understand the consequences of their actions. And no one wants this war. Mr. Netanyahu does, but we certainly do not.
Here's the president of France responding to what he believes were deliberate targeting by Israeli armed forces on French troops working with UNIFIL. Cut number 2.
It is totally unacceptable for UNIFIL troops to be deliberately targeted by Israeli armed forces. We condemn it. We do not and will not tolerate it happening again.
Before you respond, here's what he said this morning in a full screen. We don't have the tape of it. Mr. Netanyahu must not forget that his country was created by a decision of the United Nations. Therefore, this is not the time to disregard the decisions of the UN. What do you think, Colonel? Europe going to get involved in this?
No, I don't think so. The Europeans are not really capable of very much. And I certainly understand the sentiments expressed by Mr. Macron, but he's very unlikely to become involved in a direct confrontation with the Israelis. If anything, he's probably had back channels from us telling him to butt out, which I suspect he will probably do. The Israelis are riding high in the saddle. And by that, I mean the arrogance and the self-confidence that arrogance sometimes breeds is out of control. If you watch Israeli television, when the people are discussing in panel settings what's happening, there is no sense of the casualties that have been taken already in Gaza or in South Lebanon. There's no sense that Israel could lose, none whatsoever. Their news is as carefully pre-digested and disseminated as our own. So the real question, which is what you began this with, was, will Israel survive it? You and I and others who are looking at this and hopefully looking at it objectively are sensing that it might not. But that thought is completely absent from the Israeli public and from the minds of its senior leaders. Now, it may be that in private, Mr. Netanyahu and Gallant and others who are in the cabinet know differently and feel differently. But the thing is, if that's true, what do? If you step back, if you back down, who is going to negotiate with you? Hezbollah? Hamas? Any of the Arab states? Remember, you began this campaign by saying everyone was Amalek, an animal, subhuman, who deserved to be destroyed. People say, well, we meant the people in Gaza. No, you said that about Arabs.
Right.
And everyone in the region translates that into not just Arabs, but also Muslims and Christians and whatever else might be there. So who are you going to negotiate with if you back down? There's no one to negotiate with. Are we going to have any leverage with any of these countries at this point? No. Our position in the region has been destroyed.
Very, very telling observations, Colonel. One last topic. The IDF jailed a young man who's a friend of the show, Jeremy Lafredo, Italian last name, Jewish mother, American. Jeremy appeared before two different Israeli federal judges, both of whom ordered him released. He was finally released, but he was charged with aiding the enemy by reporting on damage done by Iran to Israeli positions, reporting that had already been reported in Haaretz and elsewhere. The significance to my question to you is, he's an American and the State Department was silent on this. This is not Evan Gershkovich, where the State Department went berserk when he was arrested on the basis of real evidence in Russia. This is the State Department looking the other way when this American journalist was arrested, roughed up, and released only after two judges ordered it. Should I be reading anything into this?
Yes, there are a couple of things that you should read into it. This man, I think, worked for Max Blumenthal, if I'm correct.
Correct.
And, you know, he's very courageous to do what he did. You know that I hold Max in very high esteem, and I think he's a very courageous person. They're simply interested in getting at the truth. The truth is not very popular here with American media, or certainly in Israel, or for that matter, in Ukraine as regards the truth. But you've got to understand, he's also considered to be Jewish, this man.
Yes.
And from the vantage point of the Israelis, for a Jew to want to report truthfully on what's happening inside Israel, that's a form of treason. And so they're completely unsympathetic. Now, when you move it up to the State Department level, the question that you're answering is another question that you've asked before. Who's in charge? We know who's in charge. Mr. Netanyahu is in charge. And we have to look at our government and understand that his agents, his supporters, are in positions of authority. And they are going to do what he says. It's that simple.
I want to play for you one last piece, Colonel. This is a journalist, a Palestinian journalist, Max Blumenthal tells me, very well respected. She's fluent in English, as you'll see, who witnessed the firebombing of the Al-Aqsa Martyrs hospital tent, the tents outside the hospital. There's no showing of the injured here. It's just this woman describing it, but it's quite moving. Cut number 9.
They burned people alive. I don't know. They picked this missile to cause this fire at this time of the night to kill people while they are sleeping. And then these people are waking up, watching their bodies burning turning into black and having their last breath in front of the camera. That's what happened. They did this. They did this. I know that you will not be able to watch the videos, to watch the pictures, to hear them screaming while they are burning and no one can do anything for them. But the Israeli army did this.
This is what the people in the Middle East see in their own native languages, accompanied by the videos that, of course, we're not going to show.
Remember the word Amalek,
Right.
animals. If you characterize your opponent as something less than human, it makes it much easier to kill the opponent. And I'm afraid that Mr. Netanyahu and his friends in the cabinet have tried to turn this into what it's effectively become, which is a ruthless war of extermination against not just the people of Gaza, but all of their enemies in the region. And they feel strongly that they have every right to dispose of them, and they will use whatever means are necessary, including us. And we are seen as their obedient servants. It's that simple. I don't know that you need a more sophisticated assessment than that. And it's tragic because I think Israel has historically been a beacon for moral rectitude and turpitude. And I think it's gone. That's no longer extant.
Let me start with the question. Let me end with the question with which I started. Can Israel survive Netanyahu?
It seems it's unlikely at this point. How many? We have more than 1 million people have left Israel as it is. How many will want to live there when this war ends, however it ends, in a neighborhood where you are surrounded by people that you have treated as animals? It's not encouraging.
Colonel McGregor, thank you very much. No matter how gloomy the topic.
Crawford, follow me.